All right, we're off and running on the Krug Show. Hope everybody's having a great day. It is the day after Valentine's Day. For those of you who observe, so hopefully you got it done. I'm of the belief that if you have a really good card and you still have some game, you could go the 15th and be like, "Hey, you know what? Yesterday was a crazy busy day. I just wanted to let you know, you're still the one for me," kind of a thing, and get away with it if you have the right kind of game and the right kind of relationship. Now, I would not recommend it in the first 5 years, but if you're really if you're just a Valentine's Day guy and the rest of the year you're a jackass, you know what I mean? I don't, as opposed to, slow and steady wins the race. And then you get a little latitude. Even you may have had a busy, maybe she had a busy day, maybe you had a busy day. You know what I mean? You get a little latitude once you get a little older. No? Jesse's saying no.
No, I don't. We just don't celebrate Valentine's Day. We never have.
At all?
So I don't know.
That is awesome, dude. Listen to me over here. I'm talking about having game. I'm like, I barely can dribble. This guy's Curly Neal over here.
Like a Harlem Globetrotter.
You're a Globetrotter. You're a freaking Globetrotter. You've eliminated the holiday altogether. Look at you. How'd you do that?
It just is something that
was it negotiated? Was there any lawyers involved?
No, not at all. I mean, I guess that's why we're married. It works out.
Man, that's awesome. Vish, good to see you. Jesse, good to see you. Since we last spoke, the Niners lost another Super Bowl. And this one was particularly painful. And things have gotten out of hand since. I mean, there's been a lot of things if you think about all the different things that have come down. I mean, John Feliciano said that Spencer Burford, not Colton McKivitz, was the one who blew the block on Chris Jones on the key play in overtime. And then Spencer Burford jumped on Twitter and was like, "Thanks, bro." And then John apologized for a hungover tweet. But of course, I mean, the truth is the truth, which is what Feliciano said. The Niners have also fired their defensive coordinator, seen some coaches leave. Found out that Javon Hargrave played with a broken thumb. Found out that Eric Armstead played with a plantar fasciitis and a torn meniscus. And that kind of explains why he didn't seem all that great after the Philly game when he was awesome earlier in the year. What else? What else am I missing here? There's been a few other revelations in the last couple of days. I mean, obviously Wilkes is out.
Yeah.
The Wilkes thing and Shanahan, all the discussion about scapegoating and this and that. We can start in any direction you like, but I'd like to start with Wilkes because to me that's the big one. Wilkes, I think, is a good coach, and I think he did a pretty good job. He didn't. He took the job. He didn't get to bring his scheme. He adapted to their scheme. He didn't get to take his vantage point. He adapted to their vantage point. He had to do it with somebody else's players that somebody else picked and somebody else's scheme that somebody else devised. And still, despite all of it, they got to the Super Bowl. They played well against Mahomes in the Super Bowl. They were top 10 in total defense. They were top 5 in points per game allowed. So I don't know. I mean, and yet if Mark Willard asked me on 95.7 The Game 2 days ago, is Steve going to get fired, or is Wilkes going to get fired, or is he going to keep his job? And I said he's going to get fired. And I just kind of always felt that really since the Jordan Addison zero coverage, last play of the second quarter nightmare. I just felt like Shanahan didn't trust him. And then I had heard whispers during Super Bowl week that Shanahan was more involved with the defensive game planning than he had ever been involved in any previous big game situation. And that just kind of told me all I needed to hear. So I expected Wilkes to be gone. But it still is kind of shocking because they did accomplish so much. Where do you guys sit on the Wilkes firing?
Go ahead, Vish.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same spot as you. I don't think Wilkes did like a terrible job. I think Wilkes did a fine job, and I think that the defensive regression was for more variables than just, hey, Steve Wilkes is a worse coach than Saleh and D'Amico. They
Right.
had to deal with ongoing injuries to Hargrave, we found out later, but he didn't play up to the level they expected. The Armstead injury really killed this defense. Their regression coincided with when he got injured versus Philadelphia. He had to deal with obviously Greenlaw at times being in and out. He was banged up. He had to deal with the lack of edge presence on the other side of Nick Bosa. Drake Jackson really struggled through the first part of this year, and then they got Chase Young and Randy Gregory later to help that. So he had to deal with quite a few things. I actually disagree with you. I think he was already on thin ice before the Minnesota call. By the way, guys, I'm getting an echo. Are you guys getting that?
A little bit, yeah.
If it's me, I'm sorry. I came back from Vegas. I reset everything up. I turned the volumes down. Let me see. Let me double check.
As long as the chat's not getting it, then it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, okay, then yeah, really it is.
Getting
So we can continue. So where was I at, Steve? Where was I?
We were
We were talking about a terrible echo that you were.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, no.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought
Talk about injuries,
I
Steve
thought
Wilkes,
his
whatever.
first strike one was.
Wait
the
a
fact that
second.
he
It's
became
official.
very-
It's official. Whack says no echo for me.
There we
No
go.
echo for whack. No
Means
echo.
no echo for anybody.
Yeah, there
So
you go.
where I was talking about Steve Wilkes. I think that where he lost trust with the 49ers was when he vouched for Isaiah Oliver this offseason first. That was the first big misstep of the offseason, and it caused problems with the defense that were never fixed. Steve Wilkes came to the media and said Isaiah Oliver was the best nickel corner he thought in that free agent class. He thought he was a big steal, whatever. Isaiah Oliver, by the end of preseason, was still playing at the end of those games. There wasn't a guarantee that he was going to make the 53-man roster. I think at that point, when you vouch for a player and you give a player guaranteed money, who that same offseason doesn't make your same team or almost doesn't, it starts to bring some problems. So I think from there, it started a rocky relationship with you. I'm with you. Wilkes wasn't that great of a coach, but I think the reason he needed to go, and I said the same thing on Monday, was because clearly there was something amiss with his relationship with Shanahan. It just didn't work. Shanahan didn't trust him. I think it wasn't just, you brought up the Minnesota thing. I think it wasn't just that bad call. It was that 3 days later they made him, or I don't know, it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen somebody apologize for a call 3 days after they made it. And it wasn't even the last play of the game. It wasn't Greg Williams' zero blitz versus the Raiders. This was at the end of the half. They played an entire half after it, and he was still publicly apologizing to the media for the call. Shanahan blamed him for it only the day before, and that was the Wednesday. Usually by Wednesday, you're on to Cincinnati, who funnily enough was who they were playing the next week. The way they called the timeout in the Super Bowl, there was something that just didn't work between these two guys. It sucks. I hate how Steve Wilkes was made to look in some of those situations, especially when they made him speak after the Minnesota thing, or he had to give that public apology. I thought that was odd. I thought that was unfair. I thought they made him have to admit to a mistake when other people do, but for whatever reason, they didn't have that respect for him. It wasn't just Shanahan. Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, these guys were very quick to put blame on Steve Wilkes. We weren't prepared for that. We were running our defense a little different. They changed stuff on that, or we didn't look at that, or we didn't see that. And so I think it all made sense for both parties to, I guess, in this case, firing. But I think it was a mutual parting ways because I don't know if it made sense for Steve Wilkes either.
Yeah, I think that you talk about all the things that Steve Wilkes had to work through this year. I thought he did a pretty good job. I mean, really, we can talk about yards and the decline in the running defense, which it certainly was there. We can talk about EPA and whatever you want to talk about. But the bottom line is this defense was number 3 in points given up this season. I would say not bad. And in the biggest game of the year, I felt like the defense did their job and held more than the offense did. Now, I do think that getting rid of Wilkes was the right decision just because it wasn't a great fit. That we definitely know. However, I don't like the revisionist history that we've now done over the last couple of days. Somehow games that weren't the Super Bowl, we're talking about lead up to the playoffs. We're talking about games where they couldn't stop the run and earlier in the year. And now all of a sudden people are saying that the defense is the reason that the 49ers lost the Super Bowl. That's what I don't appreciate. So for me, and it wasn't, there's not one person or one thing that lost the Super Bowl, but it definitely wasn't the defense. If you look at it, you look at statistics and what these teams brought in going into this game, the 49ers defense objectively did their job better than the offense, and that was without Dre Greenlaw. Imagine the 49ers offense losing a player equivalent to Dre Greenlaw, and they would get all the passes in the world for not scoring points. But this defense had to make stops, and it did. Was it the right move to get rid of him? Yes. Is he being scapegoated by the Niners? I don't think so. I do think a lot of fans are scapegoating him and his defense, trying to bring back past things into the Super Bowl somehow. But overall, listen, it is what it is. I'm curious to see who they're going to get. There's a lot of people out there. I know that Staley is the one that people are talking about now. That one's interesting, I guess, to say the least. But here we are.
You know, I can't blame Wilkes for the defense this year as far as and really complain with any passion, because look at all the really good run defenders that they lost in one off season. Ebukam really good against the run. Jordan Willis was good against the run.
Menahu.
Menahu was a monster against the run. He was almost like a tackle at defensive end. Ridgeway was great against the run. The best guy against the run was Aziz and Jimmy Ward. I mean, and Emmanuel Mosley. I mean, you're talking about 6, 7 good run defenders that you let get away. Then you gave a lot of money, $40 million guaranteed to Hargrave, and Hargrave is a nice little pass rusher, has some good scoot inside. But you know what? He's not a run defender. So, and then you didn't stop the run in the preseason, and then you didn't stop the run against any team that really wanted to commit to it at any point all year. So that to me is like the first part of having a good D is, do you stop the run? And the 49ers didn't stop the run. The Niners offense occasionally took teams out of running, but the Niners didn't really stop the run. And then what the guys, and the amazing part about it was, Greenlaw and Warner are still the players that they were before, but they're now just doing it all because the rest of these guys can't play the run at all. So, I mean, you got guys like Logan Ryan in there. I mean, that was embarrassing. I mean, the way he played the run. So I think I can't blame Wilkes because they were bad against the run, because I know personnel and I know all the guys that left were all good against the run. And it's not like, D'Amico, if he'd had the same guys and he was back here, like he was going to be appreciably better. You're good against the run when you have guys who make tackles, and the Niners lost a lot of really physical, hard-hitting defenders. So I can't blame Wilkes for that. As far as Shanahan, I mean, he's entitled to make a decision that, if he doesn't think Wilkes is the answer, he's entitled to say, hey, we're going in a better direction. But I will say this, you sure as hell better, you had, let's say, okay, maybe you didn't have an A-plus defensive coordinator. Maybe you had more like maybe a B-plus defensive coordinator. But yeah, you can't just bring in just like anybody from college or just anybody off your coaching staff and just be like, yeah, we're promoting this guy. The players will know. You've got to, in my mind, you've got to replace Steve with somebody of significance that says, hell yeah, we're following that guy. Like, you know what I mean? It's got to be that. It's got to be somebody who really is a popular hire or the right hire. If you have another D'Amico somewhere, if you can get a veteran like a Vrabel, heck, I've thrown out Bill Belichick because I think Belichick doesn't have a lot of options at this point. And I think cutting him a big fat check for 2 years would make so much sense right now. Johnny says I'm brutal audio. Hopefully he just means me and not my
I think
mic.
he's talking about your mic. It's like super harsh, super loud. Yeah.
Let me see.
At least on my end. I don't know if it is for everybody else, but this is what happens. Listen, when you travel,
seriously, it's my
the gain's
studio.
just really high. The gain's really high, but when you travel and you try to dial things back in, it's not the easiest thing. So
Yeah.
I feel what you're going through.
Down. Is that any better? I don't know if that sounds better.
Krug, you've always sounded great to me.
Thank you.
I think that's a little better. There's like the hissing's gone. There was like a hum or a hiss that doesn't seem to be there.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have a hard time. I don't want to say that Wilkes was great in the Super Bowl because they still drove the length of the field in overtime. But when you look at the numbers and what those guys normally score and how what a guy like Mahomes potentially can do, you had to be happy with the way the Niners kept them down in the game. Just offensively, they couldn't get it going. And once again, I mean, Kyle in the third quarter went away from the run, and to me, that was the timing of that was not great. So that would be my biggest complaint with the game was, McCaffrey fumbled. I mean, there was like 7 fumbles in the game, and the Chiefs recovered 6 of them. I mean, that had a lot to do with the outcome.
Hey, George.
Oh my gosh, dude. Oh my gosh. That was brutal.
What's that?
Hey, George.
Did you not see that, Larry?
Yeah, did you not see the mic'd up? When McCaffrey's fumbling, Kittle blocks Karlaftis, and it's a good block, so Kittle wants to let Karlaftis know in his funny Kittle way, like, hey, I blocked you. So he's like, hey, George, and George says, hey, I'm going to go recover Christian McCaffrey's fumble.
Oh, no. Really?
Yeah, it's bad. Because he blocks him, but he doesn't block him through the whistle. He literally stands there and goes, hey, George, and then George Karlaftis jumps on the fumble.
Oh, my God. That's the worst timing.
Yeah, not good.
Unbelievable.
Hey, George.
Okay, so what do you guys think? Who should be the next DC? Who do you want?
I can go first because it looks like Jesse's pondering over there about a name. I don't have a name.
I know who
for
I
you.
want.
Oh, you got a name? I don't have a name for you yet, Krug. I think I'm thinking Mike Vrabel right now because he has experience with a similar kind of defense a while ago when he was at Ohio State. Not too close to the same, but they had a similar style 4-man front and they played a similar distribution of coverages. If you remember, Ohio State had Jeff Hafley, the 49ers. Mike Vrabel was at Ohio State as well. There's a connection with all of them. And so then I would say Mike Vrabel, but I want a guy who knows this scheme. I want a guy who's going to run this scheme for how they want to run it. So don't give me these guys who don't run this 4-man front. I don't want Brandon Staley. I don't want those kinds of guys. I want a guy who's going to run this scheme the way they want to, and we'll see. They believe in this scheme. They've built the personnel for this scheme. This is the best way to use Fred Warner. This is the best way to use Nick Bosa. This is the best way to use Dre Greenlaw. This is the best way to use a lot of your best players. So I think they should stick with that scheme. And Albert Torres says only issues Vrabel runs a 3-5. Yeah, Vrabel, the type of defense the 49ers ran, the Vrabel didn't really run that in Tennessee. I'm talking about when Vrabel was at Ohio State all the way back in the day. I think that was before he went to Houston. Was he Ohio State, then Houston?
Right. He was.
Yeah. Okay, so that would be the thing. I'm not convinced on a name, but I want a name that's familiar with the scheme, that's familiar with the philosophy. And I've heard some people say maybe they can coax Jeff Ulbrich out of it. I think that would be great. Jeff Ulbrich was with Shanahan and Dan Quinn in Atlanta. He's coached with Raheem Morris. Then he's coached with Saleh. I think that would bring some continuity. That would bring a similar vibe, similar scheme, all of that. So I think that would be a good name.
Yeah, that is a good name. Jeff Ulbrich, who went to University of Hawaii, former Niner linebacker.
Right.
Is what the linebacker coach, or is he the DC?
No, he's the DC, and he calls the plays with the Jets. I just read somewhere that they might be able to coax him, and Saleh would let him leave.
Be a major promotion for him. That'd be a good one.
Would it?
Oh, I would say.
Job, right?
I would say coming to the 49ers at this point with what they have. Now there's also.
Who do you think's got more talent, the Jets or the Niners?
Oh, the Jets for sure.
Right, Quincy Williams.
Sauce. They got a bunch of guys. I mean, their front. Their front right now is put together. The Niners. I mean, I don't know if people realize this, but the 49ers only have 6 or 7. I mean, they've got a bunch of D linemen, but they're Austin Bryant and guys like that. I mean, they don't have a lot of starting D linemen. I mean, I believe if you look at the 49er, depth chart. Now, granted, it's a lot to go, but I mean, Bosa, Armstead, Hargrave, Drake, Kalia Davis, Robert Beal. So you only have 7 guys. Chase Young, Cleveland Farrell, Kevin Givens, Javon Kinlaw, Randy Gregory, Sebastian Joseph Day. Those guys are all free agents. They're going to be challenged this year to put that defensive line together and build up the offensive tackle. They badly need an offensive tackle. That's probably going to be a round one deal. So it's going to be a major challenge for sure. Who's your guy, Jesse? Who you want? Who are you thinking is that the guy?
By the way,
No.
what I said was completely wrong. I'm just looking it up. Jeff Hafley and Mike Vrabel were about 8 years apart in Ohio State, so there's no continuity.
Hafley's older.
Maybe no. Vrabel's way older at Ohio State. I thought maybe then Vrabel when he was back there, because Vrabel was there in 2012. I'm reading it right now. So he was there in 2012. I thought maybe there would be some scheme continuity. Forget what I said about Vrabel. There wouldn't be scheme continuity. I think he's been similar to how he's been in Tennessee his whole time. And so
but scheme continuity might not be a prerequisite. If you listen closely to Shanahan, it's like he's willing to.
Well, he said you have to convince him that you basically have to convince Kyle Shanahan that a way that you think you can use his defense is better than the way he thinks. Because you have to remember this scheme, they took the Seattle scheme. He's the one who adapted the front, right? He's the one who brought in Kasaric and changed the front to the Jim Schwartz wide 9 front. So there's an adaptation where he thinks this is the best way to use this defense and this personnel. Who do you think is going to convince him that they have a better way?
Well, and it's also about sometimes about who you can bring with you. If you're Vrabel, can you bring, I don't know, Azeez Al-Shaair with you? Because I think Azeez would be a nice replacement to Dre Greenlaw. He knows the defense, and he's kind of invested in the team. So the other guy who discovered Azeez was Chris Kiffin. He's now with Houston as the linebacker coach. You could try to bring him back. He does have some experience as a coordinator, not a lot, but some. And then, I don't know. I mean, some people, the craziest story of all this week was that this report that NFL people may not be hiring Vrabel because of his physical dimensions.
It's
what?
So weird.
That is the weirdest thing
he's too physically
heard.
Imposing or something.
Yeah. It's like, what the heck does that mean? I mean, what are we talking about? I mean, Mean Joe Green was a coach. I mean, he was pretty imposing. I mean, my gosh. Some of the most imposing football players are the best coaches, right? So I didn't get that one at all. It's like somebody said that he's too imposing and he's too intimidating in an interview process. But to me, I think Vrabel would be a very good coach. He's been a head coach. I just think that it's going to have to be somebody with some name recognition. It can't just be. I don't think you can just say, "Hey, Daniel Bullocks," hop in there. You're in-house and you're the next guy up. I think you just got rid of a pretty established guy off of a pretty good season. You better have a guy that when we hear the name, we're all like, oh yeah, that's a clear upgrade, right? I mean, otherwise that seems very, very arbitrary to run Wilkes out if you're just going to run him out for just like whoever's left in the room. I don't know.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think that's probably the guy that it's going to be. Well, I mean, we'll see. I hear what you're saying, and I think the splash hire makes a lot of sense. Obviously, I know that you've been talking about Bill Belichick. I don't know how realistic that is. Maybe it is. Vrabel, I've heard Pete Carroll's name out there. The splash hire would be great. The name recognition. And I think that's more if you're going to change a scheme. Here last year, they had somebody on the hook who's a great defensive coordinator, and Vic Fangio, who sounded like he wanted to be here. Remember, he was going to Miami, and then it was like, oh, pump the brakes. San Francisco wants to interview him, not quite going to Miami yet. And then the 49ers passed on him because it was too much of a difference of opinion in schemes. So if a great defensive coordinator like Vic Fangio can't convince Kyle Shanahan to change a scheme, I mean, is anybody going to be able to convince him? And if that's the case, go with somebody that is in-house, that knows exactly how you have ran things, knows how you want to run things, and it's an easy transition, and that's Bullock. So we'll see. I'm curious to see who it eventually is, but Staley.
If it's Bullock's, doesn't it feel weird that they just didn't do it mid-season?
Didn't do it last year or mid-season?
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I mean, also, I don't like the idea of Shanahan just kind of, not really committed. If he goes with a Vrabel, if he gets a Belichick, he's committed. He's committed. Those guys have a set seat at the table, and those guys get to run a defense. If you go with somebody in house right now, I mean, it's Shanahan grabbing the wheel, in the middle of the drive. I don't know if I like that. I mean, I don't know if I like somebody who's got enough credibility to like be running the show. Don't you think? I mean, it's the 49ers. They, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it was good for Belichick to dabble in the offense, and I don't think it's good for Shanahan to dabble in the defense.
I don't think Shanahan wants that though. Like I tend to think that Shanahan's had more input with DeMeco and Saleh than we think. Now, I'm not saying it's from the standpoint that he's like directly involved in doing game plans, but I'm sure that the buck stops with him in terms of he's controlling what they do. I mean, he changed Saleh's scheme. The Seattle scheme never had the wide 9. Saleh wasn't the one who added the wide 9. Shanahan was the one who did that. So I think that a lot of this is his vision, right? He brought in Saleh in the first place, not because he wanted to hire Saleh, because he wanted this style of defense. There's a distinction there, right? Sean McVay hired Wade Phillips, but he didn't look for Wade Phillips' scheme. He just wanted a veteran defensive coordinator to control the defense. Shanahan looked for this specific scheme and then sought Saleh to be the one who implements it, right? They wanted to bring Raheem Morris originally. Atlanta wouldn't let Raheem Morris go. Raheem Morris doesn't even run this scheme anymore. That's the funny part. So I think he's always had input, and I think he's always going to want somebody that he can talk to. And I think Jesse's point about Vic Fangio is why he wouldn't want somebody like what you're describing, Larry. Do you think maybe that you would prefer that for Shanahan? Do you think it would be better if he just gives somebody the defense, gives it to them, lets them run their scheme, lets them run that part? They're like the head coach of the defense, and he can just be fully focused and devoted to the offense? Because I don't think it's ever been like that for him.
I know. I think that's the best, way to do it. And you know who did it that way? Sean McVay. When he had Wade Phillips, and a little bit when he had, the Charger coach that everybody's talking about, Brandon Staley. He kind of, McVay, from what I had heard, was very hands off on the defense, and was very much just like, I'm the offensive czar, and that's his defense. So I don't know. You don't really know until you see how they divvy up the responsibilities of preparation throughout the week, so on and so forth, and what's the impact? What impact does each coach have on the game plan, and what plays are in they run, what plays they don't, so on and so forth. So it's hard to really know. Some of these things are labels, and there's all kinds of guys are doing everything. Other staffs, you're only doing exactly what you're doing, and everybody else has got a total autonomy. I don't know. I'll say this. They need some serious reshuffling on the defensive side of the ball, because, they've got older Armstead, Hargrave, Bosa, a bunch of free agents on your defensive line. No Greenlaw coming back. You don't know about Hufanga. So, I mean, they really they've got a little bit more substantial needs than I even thought even 3-4 weeks ago. They got to get themselves another safety. They got to get themselves probably another corner. They've got to get themselves, and I'm truly number one corner if they could find one. They got to get themselves another big time linebacker. And then they probably need 5 defensive linemen. I mean, it's and that's just on the defensive side of the ball. So there's a lot of needs there for the Niners for sure.
100%. And I think when we start looking at the draft and all of that, and I'll kick it to you, Jesse, because I feel like this has been a little bit group back and forth real quick. But I think we're going to come to a conclusion that edge rusher is probably where they need to go with their first round pick again. I started feeling that way when I started looking at this defensive line going into the Super Bowl. Jesse, you're shaking your head because you're probably thinking the same thing.
It just, of course, it's going to be a defensive lineman. Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
They need one too, though.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Here's one for you. Why not? And me and you had this this debate a couple years ago, and I really wanted this player, and you didn't. Why not trade a second rounder for Hassan Reddick, who's now on the block?
Is he on the block?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he
they allowed
requested
him
a
to
trade, and they gave him
Do you think
permission.
he's a scheme? Do you think he's a scheme fit though? Because he's gonna have to. He's gonna have to play this the way they used to play Bruce Irvin.
They don't. The Niners
they don't
recently
play-
like these 270 guys.
But
And he's
Reddick-
not. He's 237.
Right. The thing with Reddick, because now they don't play the Seattle scheme, right? The Seattle scheme allowed you to have a smaller end because you play your Sam linebacker over the tight end on the line of scrimmage. Now they play the Sam linebacker off the ball. Oren Burks is an off-ball linebacker. So that was back in the day when Bruce Irvin used to play Sam linebacker on base because he would play over the tight end and set the edge. And then on pass rushing downs, he would be the extra pass rusher. If they can do that with Reddick, I'm in. Otherwise, I think he would be an utter liability for them in the run game with his size. What do you guys? Or maybe do you guys think he can play off the ball? Jesse, do you think he can play off the ball on rundowns?
I mean, I look at it, and this defense was at its best when they had a speed rusher like Dee Ford. Remember how impactful Dee Ford was that season? He was arguably the worst defensive lineman of the four when you had Bosa and Armstead and Buckner. But man, when he was not playing, which was a big chunk of that season, it was a clear difference. That pass rush was so dynamic when he was on the field. And I just feel like that's something that Hassan Reddick can bring. But again, it all comes down to who you hire. If you hire somebody like a Vrabel or like a Bill Belichick, who's going to do some exotic, crazy things and can figure out how to make things like that work, then absolutely you bring somebody like that in. If you want to go in-house and bring in a Bullocks or somebody that is going to keep your exact system, then no, it probably doesn't work.
The thing that to me that's so intriguing about Belichick is that Belichick is the best defensive backfield coach of all time. I mean, he's great at identifying guys who can play, and that's why Marcus Jones and Jack Jones and who's the other guy? Jack Jones, who they cut, of course, eventually.
Yeah, right. That's like saying he can identify talent and go into Razai Dowling.
But I think that was a personality thing with Jack Jones. I think Jack Jones is a really good player. But I mean, he found both those guys. He also found Duggar, and he's just really good at developing defensive backfield talent, like George Seifert, like Ray Rhodes. And look at the Niners. I mean, Lenore, Ambry, Jair, Hufanga, Luter, Womack. I mean, they've got a half dozen, draft picks that were all, they like all these players, but they need to develop these guys a little bit. And if you could get Bill, my God, I think he either would develop them or find other guys, and they would be good on the back end. But I mean, it's a major pipe dream because it's like, Jed would have to be willing to pay him probably at least $25 million over 2 years. Shanahan was not going to be able to walk into his meeting and say, no, you know what, we don't want to do that. He's going to have to just totally sign over the defense to him. But I think Shanahan at this point might be in that mode to do that. I mean, it's got to be getting desperate. He's smart. He knows the biz. He knows you don't get forever. I mean, Andy Reid got fired in Philly after 13 years. Now, what's Shanahan in, 7 now? So I mean, he's got to get it going right now. I mean, the first Kansas City Super Bowl, he's a little ahead of schedule. This one they were, a little behind schedule. Now they're far behind schedule. So we'll see if they can get this thing done. But I think it's time to start looking for a little bit more desperate. I mean, I know in an ideal world, you get it done with some young guy and you get all the credit and this and that. But guess what? You're not in an ideal world anymore. Detroit's getting better. Green Bay's getting better. Mahomes is not getting any, Mahomes doesn't seem to be going anywhere. You still got Josh Allen. You got Joe Burrow. You got a bunch of you got a very competitive NFL right now. So if they want to get it done, they're going to have to really build up their roster because there's a lot of turnover this year. I would expect Darnold to be gone. Most of those D linemen are going to be gone. You guys were mentioning Reddick. I like Reddick.
Darnold.
Yeah, Darnold.
Do?
Seriously. You mentioned Reddick, and Reddick's an interesting one, but I'll tell you another one I read today that I think is even more interesting. the Chargers are $45 million over the cap.
I'd say Bosa.
Joey Bosa is probably going to get cut, right? I mean, he's probably going to be cut.
Maybe.
So, there's at least a chance, or he's either going to be cut or he's going to be traded for like a 6th-round pick. He's going to get traded.
We know the Niners roster is pretty hefty, right? In terms of
Niners are $4 million over the cap, but the Chargers are $45 million over the cap. So, I mean, the Niners are going to have a bunch of openings on their D line unless you want those guys back. Are they going to re-sign Gregory? Are they going to re-sign Chase Young? I don't think they're going to re-sign any of those guys. I think they're.
What I'm saying is, if you do add a Joey Bosa to this team, this is a team of 12 players. The rest of the roster, you're going to have like $5 million to pay the.
You're going to have to draft well for sure.
Yeah.
Now, I want to clear something up on the cap space because I'm pretty sure that the rollover hasn't shown up yet for these teams, which means
it will show over, and I think they have 37 million rolling over,
something like that.
But even then, I saw the Albert
still gonna be tight.
article today that they have 8 players that are making $198 million of their cap next year, and then they got to pay Brandon Ayuk as well. Diamador Lenore is probably going to be looking for an extension, so paying your own, you have that.
But those guys, when you extend, they're not going to hit the cap this year. It's next year.
No, they're going to hit it later. But you're talking about they have to put together the rest of this roster. They're going to lose a lot of people, like Krug said this year. I think they only have 3 defensive linemen signed past this year, or 4, because I keep forgetting about Drake Jack. Oh no, 5 actually, but 3 in terms of who we think is going to play in Armstead, Hargrave, and Nick Bosa, because we'll see what Drake Jackson, and then from there, the rest of the Kalia Davises, those guys haven't proven to be rotation pieces yet. So when you're talking about filling out the rest of this roster, and you're talking about money there, I felt like one of the things with this team, I'll go there. I thought they were a little top heavy this year. And I think if you add Joey Bosa and you go in that direction, you're taking away more depth. You're getting even more top heavy. You're getting even more veteran. You're getting another guy in a second contract. You're getting another guy who's been injured a lot. I know where Krug's going, but I think what they need to do is I think they need to get younger and deeper in their defensive line. I think that's what they were missing this year. I think they had a bunch of names, but they didn't have a bunch of guys who were really just getting after it and getting after the quarterback. I think they need some young, hungry dogs. They need a Charles Omenihu, a guy playing for a contract, an Arden Key playing for a contract, a Samson Ebukam who can change his position and get a bigger contract. What do you guys think?
They definitely need guys that can play. It can't be like, well, he's on the roster, but 3 years from now he's going to be something. No, you can't have 3 years on the roster, guys. You got to have guys that can do it right now, because you're going to lose a bunch of guys who are doing it right now. So there's just going to be a lot of snaps to fill on that defensive line. And then they just, they're going to have to be effective in how they draft. I mean, that's simple as that. I mean, I think they got a couple good linebackers in Jalen Graham and D Winters, but they didn't play them at all this year.
Right.
And so now we go into next year not really knowing what those guys are, but I think they're both pretty good. I like their young DBs, but like Luter and Womack barely got on the field. They clearly fell out of favor. So they need to be developed, and they need to, they either need new players if those guys aren't good enough to play. I personally think they are good ip to play. I just think that for whatever reason, they didn't develop them. So I like Womack and I like Luter, and I think they're decent prospects. So we'll have to see where it goes, but they definitely, if you look at the biggest part of this offseason, they got to find a real right tackle. They got to protect Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy put up very efficient numbers operating behind a line that was, by all intents and purposes, a 20 to 25th in the league kind of line. And that's the neighborhood they were in. Yeah, they have Trent, but it wasn't a great line around him. They got to make a serious investment in their offensive line. And then while that's going on, they're going to need to make a serious, reshuffling of their defensive line. So they got to, football, it's always a challenge. And you look at these teams like Green Bay and Detroit. I mean, you think those teams are good this year, they're going to be better next year. So significantly better in some cases. So the 49ers are really going to have to be, I think they're going to need some dramatic moves. And And I think they're gonna. That's why I'm so hot to trot on the Belichick front, because at least on that front, you can make a dramatic move, and it's only going to cost you money. I mean, you can. It's not like you have to make some draft pick trade, or hit. I mean, how good of a drafting team are the Niners going to be without Adam Peters? I mean, that's another concern. Exactly. What did Peters bring to the mix? So, if guys, there's an article here that I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on, and it's 3 cut candidates. Who would you it's an interesting piece. It's written. Let's see. Enzo Flojo on Clutch Points says 3 cut candidates for the Niners, and he's got or she's got Isaiah Oliver, Colton McKivitz, Danny Gray as the 3 surprising cuts of the offseason. I don't see that as being.
I don't know that they're surprising.
Yeah, I mean
they might all be cut.
Right.
I mean, McKivitz, I think they'll probably just keep around because he's versatile and can play a bunch of positions. And Gray, it's like he'll be in camp this summer, I think. But I mean, it's time for him to either. I mean, he hasn't gotten on the field because he can't stay healthy. Isaiah Oliver, I think, is going to be a cap casualty.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Isaiah Oliver makes this team if there wasn't guaranteed money tied to him. You guys know I've been on that from pretty much the moment he was signed. It just that one just didn't ever make sense to me. I mean, just listening to you read off Colton McKivitz is a surprise cut. I don't know why. I'm just immediately thought back to the fact that one of the Niners' plans at one point was to take this same Colton McKivitz, who we saw as a below-average right tackle in his 5th year in the NFL or 4th year in the NFL, and they were going to make him their starting left tackle, possibly. It was a route they considered in 2020 as a rookie. Isn't that crazy to think about? Like, what a career journey. Like, look at where we are. But that was real conversation at one point. But I'm with you on the cuts. I don't know about cut, but I'll give you a player who I think they probably should move off of. And this is not like they should move off of him because he's no longer good. It's just I think they need to change team culture a little bit. And this guy represents some of the losses that they've had in the past. I think it's time to move on from George Kittle. They have an out on his contract after this year. I think at some point they need to move one of their highly paid players because they're missing depth in both lines of scrimmages. And I think the key for the 49ers, both of these next 2 off seasons, is to rebuild their defensive line in some capacity, because that now they have Nick Bosa highly paid. They need to put the depth around Nick Bosa the way they did 2 years ago by getting the Arden Keys, the Menahus, the Ebukams. Those are the kinds of players that they need to put around Nick Bosa once again. They need to build their offensive line back up. I mean, 4 out of 5 guys being below average just doesn't work in the NFL after a while. I know I've been a big proponent of their offensive line isn't as bad as everyone says. It doesn't matter. It needs to get better. So I think that in order to do both those things, you need assets. The Niners have some assets. They don't have a lot of them. I think Kittle is the one guy of their stars that's movable when you look at his contract. I think also Kittle has been here. He represents the team culture since 2017. He turned it around, but he's also been part of 4 pretty tragic losses. I think having some fresh energy, new breath, new leadership. He's one of the leaders that's been around. He turned this around. He's an all-time great 49er, but I think you have some freshness with Brett Purdy, the connection with Brandon Ayuk. You have some new energy. Guys who haven't been through it and lost that many times in the playoffs. Guys who don't look at Kyle Shanahan and see the scars of what could have been and what they haven't done in the last 4 years. I think when I look at all of that, get a little change of scenery, turn this team, change its identity a little bit, tinker with it, propel Purdy as a leader, make him the leader, put him in front of the team instead of Kittle and these Juszczyk and these kinds of guys. I think you move in a different direction that way. What do you guys think on that? Jesse, you whispered the name before I even said it, so that makes me
I know. I already knew. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I think the reality of the situation is, if you look at these contracts, none of them are going anywhere, and it's a really bad situation because your candidates to move money back and restructure are all the guys that you shouldn't want to do that with. It's your Armsteads, it's your Kittles, it's your CMCs, your Debos. That's how you're going to free up cap space. But those are guys that you shouldn't want to add years onto at the end of their contract and pay them when they're either a shell of themselves or just not on the team altogether. But that's how they can free up money. Listen, I think it all just depends on where you're coming from or what you think this team is. I personally think this cast of characters has had their chance. They've had their opportunity. And for this group,
dude.
that's what I'm saying. For this group, as it's currently constructed, it's not going to win. How many times do we have to see it to understand it's not going to happen? So you don't have to go in full-blown rebuild, get rid of everybody, cut. And that's not it, but you have to change something. And you can't hang on to players forever, because if you do that, you end up in trouble. Get rid of players a year early versus a year late. He is the perfect candidate to do that with, because he's on the other side of 30. He's still very good, which means you can get something for him, but you can change the culture just enough to where it might be enough to get you over the hump. I agree with you.
Right.
He's their swagger, though. He's a big part of their swagger.
But that swagger has not
swagger's
won,
got
dude.
zero rings.
I think you have to change the culture up a little bit. I understand. I'm not telling you George Kittle is no
But they're
longer
tight. The rest of the
player.
tight ends are terrible.
That's where you have to sacrifice being a little worse at tight end and maybe being a little better in your offensive line. Like that, there's a give and take to this. I'm not sitting here and telling you Kittle needs to be moved because he's not a great player. But he is a great player. But this team, you can't just run this same thing back, Krug. How many times are you going to keep putting this same core together and saying, oh, they can't win the Super Bowl? Well, this went wrong. You need to get better in somehow. In order to get better, you have to get rid of one of these guys. Otherwise, you're not going to have the assets to be able to move things around.
What do you think you get for Kittle?
He's the one. I don't know about that yet, because it would depend on how his contract is viewed in the market.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like
A couple second rounders, probably.
To me, I'd be more willing to, entertain.
He's older. He's getting hurt. Like, dude, Super Bowl week, the way he was used in the Super Bowl, does anybody not think he was way more banged up than they let on? He barely did it. He was barely in the game plan in the Super Bowl. He probably didn't practice that much.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's approaching 30, right? I mean, when you're approaching 30 in the NFL, 30 is a big, that's a big age. That's a big age. I mean,
what are you going to do, right? Like, you got to put some younger players out there, Krug. And I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. But you got to put some younger players out there. Guys like Kittle became Kittle because in 2017, they got to develop and play on a bad team. And in 2018, younger players have to play. They have to grow. They have to develop. You can't just wait till George Kittle becomes a bad player and then be like, now we're going to move off of him. Now we're going to find our next solution at tight end. You're never going to get anything for him. At some point...
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear you. I mean, you're going to have to move some players around. I mean, Eric Armstead is another one. I mean, Eric Armstead's pretty beat up. You gonna lean on him as and pay him the kind of money, knowing how beat up he is. Nothing lasts forever. I'll tell you, the Brandon Ayuk call is going to be very difficult to make. I mean, I love Ayuk. But the reality is that the 49ers are 32nd in the NFL in pass attempts, and they're going to have $50 million worth of wide receivers. And I don't think Debo's tradable, and they don't want to move Jennings, I'm sure, based on the way he looked in the playoffs.
And he's restricted again, so they
he's restricted.
1-year deal, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I there's a lot of talk about what do you guys make of the smoke around Ayuk and his brother, and I want to be in Vegas, and this is why we're leaving, and he's like, I want to be here, but I only want to be here if everything's right. And then he was asked about that, and he's like, if we're trying to win a championship. And it's like, well, dude, do you think there's ever going to be a time that you're not trying to win the championship? I mean, you're the 49ers. What do you think? Is Ayuk going to be dealt, or is Ayuk going to be $26 million richer? Are they going to get that done, or is he going to be somewhere else?
I think he's just upset right now. I mean, obviously, they just lost the Super Bowl. Any competitor feels like if you get the ball in my hands, I could have won the game. He was open in a couple of those instances and probably could have won the game, but blitzes got in quick. The offensive line missed their assignments, and he wasn't able to do so. So I think he's hurt. I think that much was clear in the locker room. I don't think he's going to go anywhere, but you talk about moving somebody. We talked about how hard it is to move all those contracts, Kittle included, and that's why I don't think anybody's going anywhere. But if anybody could, it would be Ayuk because his contract is the most movable. It's a guaranteed contract, fifth-year option, which means if you move it to another team, you take zero cap hit. And he's 26 years old. He's coming off of the best season of his career. All those things. So you're gonna get something good for him. So if anybody was actually going to be moved, it probably would be him. And I think that's about as wrong of a choice as you could make out of the cast of characters that we've discussed. So I would say don't move him. I don't think he'll get moved, but it is the most movable contract.
Yeah, Jesse's right about his contract being the most movable, and he's also exactly right that they shouldn't move him. He's the one guy when we're talking about, like, dude, Christian McCaffrey has had 300 touches in 4 out of the 6 years he's been in the NFL. And the 2 years he didn't get 300 touches, it was because he was hurt. So this is a guy, when we're talking about running back longevity, he's probably on the decline if we're being realistic. And this is one of the most special players a lot of us have seen in the running back position, and that's just the reality. George Kittle probably on the decline. Deebo Samuel probably on the decline. Ayuk is the one ascending young star player that you can pair with your young quarterback. It makes absolutely no sense to trade him, in my opinion. And I think that beyond just that, like it's not just the okay, can you trade Brandon Ayuk? It is, well, why is he doing this? Which was Krug's first question. Like, why is he saying what he's saying in the media? I don't think it's a thing of him being hurt. I think he's just understanding what he's about to do. He understands what the business is, and he understood that right as soon as this season ended. And I think that he wants to come back to the 49ers, and he said as much, but he's also not, he's ready to play ball. He's seen how the contract negotiation went for Deebo. He saw how it went for Kittle. He saw how it went for Nick Bosa. It's going to get contentious, and he's ready. He's not going to give an inch. He's already said it. He's not sacrificing his price. I think that's exactly what he should do. I think he's just doing a good job handling his business, and I actually like the way he answered the questions. I think he's in a better spot with how he handled it than Deebo a few years ago, because it's not that he's saying he wants to go or anything like that. He's just making it clear that he'll stay, but you better make sure that you pay him what he's worth, which makes 100% sense. Or he should be doing exactly what he's doing.
The one thing that's for sure is that it's a cap sport and you can't pay everybody. And the nice thing is the Niners have a bunch of draft picks this year, so it's not like they don't have an ability to, find people in the draft. But I'm looking at their Spot Track 2024 salaries, and I'm going to give you the top 10 players on the Niners, and I need you to tell me the two of them that you're fine going forward without.
I already know the answer to that one.
Here they are. Here are the top 10 paid 49ers. And you've already kind of said you want George out, so that he's in there. So number 1 is Trent Williams, $31.5 million. Deebo, number 2, $28.6 million. Armstead, number 3, $28.3 million. Fred Warner's 4 at $24.4 million. Kittle's 5 at $21.9 million. Charvarius Mooney Ward, $17.9 million. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's 6. 7th on the list is Hargrave at $15.4 million. 8th is Nick Bosa at $14.6 million. 9th is Christian McCaffrey at $14.1 million. And 10th is Brandon Ayuk at $14.1 million. You got to tell two of those guys beat it. You're moving forward without two of those guys.
Well, I'll give you one more. I'm going to give you 4 guys, and then you can choose any of the 2 that you want. I don't care. You can give me Kittle. You can give me Hargrave, Armstead, and Deebo. You choose the 2. I don't care which 2, but I'm fine losing any of them.
Give me Kittle and Javon. Here's the one thing I'll say about Deebo. He had a terrible Super Bowl. He also got hurt in the Super Bowl. And for whatever reason, nobody's talking about the fact that he got hurt. And I thought when he pulled up on, you're right about that. That's true. But I thought when he pulled up on his hamstring, it was a serious injury. And then when he came back in, it was like, okay, is he playing on one leg? Is he hobbled? What's it? I thought Tony Romo and Jim Nantz did a terrible job covering the fact that he was hurt and he came back in. And then the subsequent third down, the drive after he gets hurt, Kyle Shanahan calls 3rd and 10. an in-breaking route with Debo as the primary, with Trent McDuffie, who had been locking him down before he got hurt on inside leverage covering Debo. He's running an in-breaking route versus bad leverage versus inside leverage. The guy's inside of him, and he's trying to beat him to the inside. I think that there were like other variables that played into it. Like, why are you throwing the ball to Debo right after he fell down and grabbed his hamstring? Like, why on the biggest third down are we going there? So I think there's other stuff like that. I still think he's impactful. He was very good in the NFC Championship game. And mainly the reason I'm not including him in these discussions is, guys, I just don't think it's realistic to move him this offseason. That's really what it comes down to. Like, I can defend Debo all I want because he's my favorite player and all of that. If he was tradable this offseason, I would be talking about it as well right now. But guys, I don't know if you guys look at that contract and say they can do this, they can do that. I just don't see how they move Debo Samuel this offseason.
I don't either. No, and
I think it's funny because I remember when the contract things were going on, and I was like, trade him now.
Mm-hmm,
you can get so much for him. Send him to the Jets. You can get these players and these picks. And everybody was like, don't do it. Now everybody in the chat's saying, God, get rid of Debo. It's like, oh, geez, if we would have just done that 2 years ago, we would have been in a much better spot, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
If the Raiders come calling, offering the 13th pick in the first round for Ayuk, would you make that trade? It's basically the Buckner trade all over again.
Is Rome Odunze going to be on the board by 13?
Is that who you like?
Well, if Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison are gone, sure, I'll take Rome Odunze. Are you kidding?
I like Malik Neighbors. I don't like Rome Odunze. He doesn't do anything for me. I was thinking J.C. Latham or Taliesin Fuaga. The 49ers, don't you think this is – I mean, the only way I would move Ayuk is if I'm guaranteed to get a blue chip tackle that I think I can – it's going to be like my guy for the next decade. Otherwise, I'm not in a real rush to move Ayuk. And even so, 13th pick overall is rough.
Would you have the blue chip tackle over Ayuk? Because after the Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase situation, I'm not so sure if you need the blue chip tackle over the
Yeah, that's a good point. It's just I think the 49ers are at a point where they need to. I mean, I like Javon Foster and Ladarius Henderson and Christian Jones and some of these guys that are going to be more like second or third round picks. And I over the tackles necessarily in the first round. But I mean, those two guys, Latham and Fuaga, are just monster. Latham is 355 or whatever, and just kind of looks lean and he looks like he could be a dominating right tackle for a long time. So that's a tough one, but yeah, no, I
still to win a ring this year, right? And if you get rid of Ayuk for the 13th pick and you draft another receiver, I mean, you've basically shot yourself in the foot because Kyle doesn't like to play rookie receivers. Like, they just don't see the field a lot. It's a tough offense to learn.
Yeah,
and it takes a lot to earn Kyle's respect and his trust to put you on the field. I think you have more of a chance. If you said that we're going to trade Ayuk for the 13th pick and get a really good right tackle who has a future at left tackle, I'd probably listen to it. But if you said, hey, we're going to draft whatever receiver that's not Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm out.
Well, no,
is Ayuk even worth the 13th pick? Like, I love Ayuk, but DeForest Buckner was traded for the 13th pick. Like, could you get, like, Tyreek Hill was traded for 2 first-round picks at the end of the first round.
It's interesting, though. It's like if you have a need at receiver, I think what Jesse just said there is total reality. And it's not just a Niner reality. It's just reality across the league. It's like really good receivers don't play well that first year. So it's like if you want to be good next year and you need receiver help, it's like that's why you start looking at veterans. There's been a market. I mean, there's been a market for A.J. Brown and D-Hop and it seems like if there's any position in the NFL that's consistently traded, it seems like it's diva, youngish wide receivers who teams get a lot for. I mean, God, Kansas City got a lot for Tyreek Hill, that's for sure.
Right, but I would love to put that on the value chart next to the 13th pick. The other thing with Ayuk is I would say of the Niners' weapons, he's got the best chemistry with Purdy. And I think that counts for something when you're talking about a young quarterback going into his third year. He's still so young. It feels like every game he's played has been so important, so he feels a little bit older than he is, but he's so young. I don't know that you would want to take away that young connection that he seems to trust. He has that chemistry with. It's definitely better chemistry than with Debo, Kittle, for sure.
Guys, if you ran into Kyle Shanahan, we're going to get to some of these supers here, but if you ran into Kyle Shanahan and he said, "Hey, I recognized you, Jesse. I've seen your YouTube show," or "Hey, man, I recognize you. F you, Jesse, and you know what, Vish, I've seen what you do, and you know what, the hell with you."
Oh, what? I've had your back this whole time.
Let's just say Shanahan ran into you guys and said, "Hey, I recognize you. You guys know a lot about the Niners. Be direct with me. What did I do wrong? What's the number one thing that I did wrong on Super Bowl Sunday? Is it the coin flip and OT? Is it the, hey, you gave up on Christian McCaffrey in the third quarter? You didn't have your team prepared for they didn't know some of the rules at the end. Your special teams muffed a punt, missed a PAT. You didn't go through the fumble drill enough. Kansas City fumbled 5 times and recovered 4 of them. Or are you going to just believe to your core that it was just Dre Greenlaw and bad luck? If he said to you, what was my biggest screw up on Super Bowl Sunday, you would say what to Shanny?
Your biggest screw up happened way before Super Bowl Sunday. It happened in the preparation, and it happened even before that. You wear way too many hats. Your analytics department failed you on the overtime situation. You don't have an offensive coordinator. And because of all of that, I think you have a lack of preparedness. When you look at the overtime rules and the right call, you made the wrong call there. You, for whatever reason, your quarterback said that he wasn't ready for as much man defense as Kansas City played, yet Kansas City they were top 10 in man defense, and they were number 2 in DVOA. So how your quarterback's not ready for man defense boggles my mind. Somehow every time you get in a big game, you abandon the run for some sort of stretch. This time it was in the third quarter where you started the third quarter with 9 out of 10 passing plays. And your game plan was built around Deebo Samuel, who probably should have been the third or fourth option with McDuffie out there. So you wear way too many hats.
After he got hurt.
And you went out. Yep, exactly. So you wear too many hats. You take on way too much. You need to have people around you that you trust. You can't do it all. So if you want to win the Super Bowl next year, get people around you that you trust and allow them to help you make good, sound decisions leading up to and preparing your team for the Super Bowl.
Vish, that was a good one. Vish?
Well, one, I first, the QB school is right here. JT O'Sullivan is in your chat, Larry, and I think we should pull up his comment because he's answered this question. Yeah, I just saw him in your chat.
No, are you serious?
I'm 100% serious. He said
JT O'Sullivan on the Krug show?
Yeah. I mean, he probably remembers you from 2008. Did you
Stark
guys have
says, Jesse, please call Grant, put him on speaker. Larry going AWOL.
Oh, he said,
where is it? Where is it? How far back?
He said something about protection in the third and fourth quarter or third something. I haven't watched his breakdown yet, by the way. I haven't had time this week, but Jesse and I were talking about it on the phone.
His breakdowns are very, very strong.
They're excellent.
Yeah, seriously.
On big third downs in the fourth quarter and OT.
I don't see JTO in here.
It's the QB school. The QB school. Come on.
Oh, it's that. It doesn't say JTO. It says the QB school.
No,
yeah,
it's gonna be QB school. I don't see it though.
Look at Vish. Vish has got me scrolling.
Oh, yeah. There it is. I see it.
What time?
It was just before 11, I think.
Right.
There it is. At 11, actually.
11 is 9 for you, Krug.
Wait a second.
Yeah. It's actually
Is that it? Larry eats pig in a pickle breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Is that it?
It's actually 8 for him. 8 o'clock for you.
Famous.
It's 8 o'clock for me? Okay.
Yeah,
8 o'clock. 8 o'clock.
Conversion. That's clearly famous soccer player David Villa, former Spain legend.
He
says
said
you
pass
guys are
pro
going
on
off
big
the
third
rails.
Is this
down.
it?
Yeah,
Starks?
No.
Larry, I recognize you. I've seen you at Bacon and
upset us
Pickle.
now. We upset
that
his
it?
name was JTO. We upset him, Krug.
Where is it? Oh, here it is. The quarterback school. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
Pass pro on big third downs, fourth quarter, and overtime. Yeah.
I would say that
Pass
that's the
protection
evolution of
broke
his
down
offense,
on some
too.
big plays. Some big plays in this game. The pass protection broke down.
Hey,
So-
JTO,
I would agree
if
with
you're
that.
still in here, I want to know your opinion on starting McCaffrey 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. You think that's a good game plan, or
JTO is on record as saying that he does not like that. Jesse, come on, you got if you know your JTO, you know he doesn't like any of
I
the
know, I know
McCaffrey
he
5
doesn't.
yards
It's
in the
just funny.
backfield.
Every
While we're on
single
the
time
topic,
he
I
just
wanna
flips
know,
out.
I haven't seen his.
He would
He said too soon. I haven't seen his. I haven't fully.
he would have
seen his
hated back in the
breakdown.
CFL back in the day. All those guys with the motion before the snap, 8 yards deep, rolling. I'd love to see that in the NFL.
I want to know who he blames for the McDuffie 3rd and 4. Because Jesse, you and I were talking about this on, and I haven't seen his breakdown. I guess I should probably go do that and then have this conversation. But I want to see.
I think he said something along the lines of, you can't have positionless football is good until you shouldn't have positionless football. Basically saying Kittle maybe shouldn't be in the backfield, if I remember correctly. I might be mixing it up with what Warner said, though. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, okay, that's good to know. I'll watch.
As far
his
as picking
breakdown.
up the protection on the blitz, but also
because
Ayuk was open with the slant. I mean, usually you replace the blitz with a route, and Ayuk was there for the slant. For some reason, Purdy didn't throw it, whether he didn't see it, what have you. Yeah, anyways, I don't know.
Right, but he's got to scan and pick up the blitzer, doesn't he? Kittle?
Yeah, but if he's not good at that, like, what is he supposed to do? That's what I think that's kind of the point, right? Like, he's not a running back. Why is a non-running back in the backfield there to pick up a blitz when that's not his expertise?
All right, fair enough. I'm gonna go.
I guess my biggest complaint with Shanahan, if I was talking to him, would be like, "Hey, Kyle, first of all, Jesse, I think you absolutely nailed it. I think he wears too many hats. He's his own, they've got a guy up in the booth, but does he trust him 100%? No, probably. So he has to be involved, and he's, involved in the defensive game planning. Why? Because he didn't have enough trust in Wilkes to get it done. And you have to trust in your assistants. And if you don't have guys that you can trust in, that's why you go get the best assistants you possibly can. And then you get out of the way and let them do their job. But I think you're absolutely spot on saying that the analytics crew blew it as far as the overtime. You don't want the ball third, you want the ball second.
But I don't think that was the analytics. He said he took the information in
Well,
and
he's-
talked about the analytics. But I think this
To
is,
me, it was then is his defense. He was worried about his defense being tired, maybe.
He didn't say that either.
But that was the right
asking-
answer as far as I
That
was
that.
concerned.
So if he said that, I think that would have been valid, and that's what John Lynch said. But here was
Yeah.
my issue with it, and this would be the one thing I would tell him. Some of his logic with this stuff, it just doesn't make sense. Like, he often misses the simple stuff, the big picture stuff, like who are you playing type stuff, right? That 3rd and 4 is a great example because Romo on commentary says, and McDuffie does a great job hiding the blitz. The only maybe giveaway is the safety's kind of capping over the nickel, but you can't really tell McDuffie is coming on that play. But Romo says right after the play on the broadcast, he says, man, you got to know your personnel. Spags is going to come there. Even if they didn't show pressure, you know what they're going to do. They're going to be blitzing.
Yeah.
Even if they don't show it, you have to be prepared that they're going to be blitzing you and all of that. I think those are the little things that he misses. And that's where, when we're talking about this call, Larry, I'm not that upset they got the ball first, actually, because there's not a clear analytic that tells us getting the ball first or getting the ball second is more beneficial with that. I'm upset that his thought process that landed for him to get the ball first was the 3rd possession. The 3rd possession was like the last thing you needed to worry about at that point. The game could have ended 7 different ways before you even get to that third possession.
Right.
And where
Right.
he contradicts himself further, and this is where it just doesn't make sense to me, and this is where his thought process, it needs to make sense to me. His thought process is the third possession matters because we're going to score a touchdown and they're going to score a touchdown, which means that we need the ball back third because both teams are going to score a touchdown. Well, if you're so confident that both teams are going to score a touchdown that you're going to decide when you get the ball based on both teams scoring a touchdown, then why were you happy to take the field goal? You think both teams are going to score a touchdown. You picked who's going to get the ball based on when you're going to score a touchdown. Now you're going to decide to kick the field goal? Like this is what doesn't make sense to me. And he doesn't seem to like when the media questions him on it. But sometimes I feel like he doesn't even think these things through. Like with his answer for this, Larry, he says, I take in all the information and then I make a decision based on his feel. You guys know how I do this. Dude, we really don't know. There's no science to his process. There's a reason when the analytics community creates these graphs for aggressive decision-making, conservative decision-making, right? You have Dan Campbell all the way on the aggressive side. You have McVay all the way on the conservative side. Do you know where Shanahan lands in these graphs? An area called confused. Because nobody knows if he's conservative, if he's aggressive. He makes all of these decisions based on his feel, and his feel is often off in the middle of games.
Yeah, well, I really, I'm the one who asked him several weeks ago, hey, would you ever consider deferring and taking the ball, or not deferring and taking the ball right away and putting your offense on the field? And he's like, no. So I'm like, can you expand on that? And, he came into it. He's got his belief of try to score going into the half, score coming out of the half. But my whole point is you have no idea how many possessions there's going to be in a half. There could be, turnovers. There could be short possessions. It doesn't always pan out that way that you get the ball and have this like double score situation. And to me, it seems like the smarter answer is you want to put your biggest advantage. So if your defense over their offense is your biggest advantage, then you should put your defense out there first. If your biggest advantage is your offense over their defense, then you should put your offense out there. I really just kind of firmly believe that you should put your biggest advantage out there and not get into the rest of this stuff. And he just loves, he loves going into this entire thing where he wants comfort. He's like, these are my comfort area. And to me, I'm not claiming I know the most about football, but look at that scenario. You can score first, but the other team can get the ball back even if you score a touchdown. Wouldn't you want to be able to know what you need to do? To me, it's clearly second is the better option than first, and obviously the reasoning of third is such a weirdo reasoning. If you wanted to argue, hey man, my defense gassed and I just know it, so I went with that. That to me is explainable and reasonable.
He never
but just
said that though.
He didn't say that because that's not his reasoning. His reasoning is, he wants to be able to go win the game on the third possession. But as you correctly pointed out, there's 19 different ways it could end before that. So you're playing. Why play for the? It's like a manager in Major League Baseball playing for the 15th inning in the 8th. What? No, don't
Right.
Play for the 8th and the 8th. Play for the 9th and the 9th. But I don't know. Shanahan's also.
Math.
What's that?
It's simple math. I know a lot of people are like, well, there's just not a lot of analytics on it. Okay, here's the analytics. Do you want Patrick Mahomes to have 4 downs to get a first down every time that he touches the ball and have your defense in that situation ran by a defensive coordinator that, by the way, you clearly didn't trust because he just got fired? Or would you rather your quarterback to have 4 downs to get it done and put their defense in a bind? It's very simple. You get 4 downs to operate or they get 4 downs to operate. That's the decision. It's very easy to make.
But I don't think he considered it that way. I don't think he even thinks
that's right,
from the
which
4
is the
downs or
problem.
they're going for 2, and that's where it comes back to he misses the forest and sees the tree sometimes. He gets caught up in these little details. Let me ask you guys this, because I feel like we're so focused on the end of this football game, and rightfully so. A lot went wrong for the Niners then. But I'm starting to get the feeling that once you're in this back and forth situation where Mahomes, is going to get the ball, it feels like you're going to lose in those type of games to Mahomes, right? Like in the playoffs, if we're thinking about when he loses, in 2018, he lost because they didn't change the rules for him, right? They changed the rules for Josh Allen when he lost to Mahomes, but Mahomes didn't get the ball. Brady got the ball first in overtime. 3 straight 3rd and 10s he converted. They marched down the field, and Mahomes didn't get to touch the ball, and that's why they beat Kansas City in 2018. That was Mahomes' first year of starting. The next time they lost in the playoffs, right, they had all those crazy comebacks versus Houston, Tennessee. They beat the Niners in the Super Bowl, was versus the Bucs in the Super Bowl. The Bucs game in the Super Bowl is actually very similar in terms of game script to both the Niners' performances in the Super Bowl. The only difference is the Bucs converted their opportunities and made the lead insurmountable for Mahomes to come back. With that offensive line in that game, Mahomes couldn't come back. Now, there's no guarantee when you get a big lead on Mahomes, like he could still come back, right? This is the guy who turned over 24-0 in a quarter versus the Texans. But that's really your best chance against Mahomes. You have to put him in a situation, and with this offensive line, with the tackles they had this year and these receivers, I think it would have been tough for him to come back. The Niners didn't capitalize on their early opportunities to put him away. Now when you're stuck in a back-and-forth one-possession game with him, the only person that's beaten him in that game is Joe Burrow and the Bengals in 2021. And 2 things needed to happen for them to win that game. One, Mahomes actually played bad in the second half of that game. Like, that just doesn't happen in the playoffs. It actually happened in that game. And then number 2, it feels like the thing with the Chiefs, other than overcoming Mahomes, is number 95 is always going to make an incredible play on the biggest third down of the game, and it's going to make a difference. Well, in that Bengals game, they had a 3rd and 11 deep in their own territory when they went on their game-winning drive. And Joe Burrow broke Chris Jones. He broke out of a sack, escaped, and picked up 12 yards and got the first down. So those are pretty much the 2 things that need to happen to beat the Chiefs in a close game. Mahomes plays bad, and you need to somehow escape when Chris Jones makes a clutch play. It's not going to happen. The Bengals have done it basically once in the playoffs, and everybody else hasn't done it. I think the Niners' best shot at this game was to take the advantage of their early lead in the first half. I think that's what they should have done, and I think that's what screwed them up ultimately. Because once they were in the back-and-forth one-possession ball game versus Mahomes, it felt like the rules all favor him because he's always going to get the ball back, and he's Mahomes. You can't stop him.
And his weapons in this game, I mean, they had streamlined their offense to the point where it was just pretty much Mahomes, Pacheco, Rice, and Kelsey, and everybody else was not really touching the ball. But in this game, I mean, Mecole Hardman and Justin Watson really outperformed Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. I mean, that's the reality. They actually were more impactful. Their secondary guys were more impactful than the Niners' primary guys. And you know, the Niners did some really good things off defensively, I thought, in the first half of the game. But ultimately,
quarter, they got an interception on the first possession.
Yeah. But I thought the Niners could have run the ball a little bit more. And overall, you know, I mean, Mahomes had 9 carries for 66 yards. I mean, he had a great day running. He averaged, you know, over 7 yards a carry, and he kept their offense cooking, you know, and they were just good enough to beat the 49ers. And really, it was, if you said, what's the real reason? I mean, to me, my biggest complaint to Shanahan would be not using Mitchell and Mason enough in the season and not using Graham and Winters enough in the season that Greenlaw and McCaffrey, your 2 special difference makers, both got to the playoffs at less than 100%. In this game, you know, you had no Greenlaw, and McCaffrey, you know, was beat up pretty, a lot more beat up than he could have been if you had utilized some of the talent that you had on your roster and just chose not to use. So that would be my first frustration with Shanahan. I don't like the fact that, you know, I would have leaned on Christian heavy in this game, and he didn't. He went away from him in that third quarter. I don't understand that. But the other one is, guys, we never want to talk about it, but it was special teams. I mean, Chiefs always have good special teams. They have going back to Frank Gans, I mean, years and years ago. And the Niners had a muff punt. The Niners missed a PAT. You know, I mean, Kansas City fumbled 5 times, but they recovered 4. Then Greenlaw gets hurt running onto the field. I mean, there were some other issues in this game that really burned the Niners. But my complaint to Shanahan would be his usage of his running backs and his backers in the regular season. You didn't have to throw Greenlaw out there every single game like that. You could have protected him from himself, but no, he's just a collision. He's like a guy who has some of the most violent collisions in the game. He would have been a total difference maker. He already was a difference maker in the beginning of that Super Bowl. My God, he was incredible early on, but they lost him. And they lost him because they didn't play any of their young guys or Burks or Flanagan Fowles at any point. They just kept gutting it out with hurt Greenlaw, who's just a bad A. So he's always like, yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. It's like somebody needed to say, hey, Dre, take a month off. So, I thought that was a huge mistake, not having a healthy Greenlaw, and McCaffrey could have been even better if he had been fresher. So I didn't like that, and I didn't like getting away from Christian in the third. That to me, and you're right. Shanahan does this all the time. He's got multiple examples of doing this. Okay, couple last ones before we're an hour and 20 minutes in here. I don't know how long you guys wanted to go tonight, but what would you say? I think it's pretty safe to say that Detroit's coming, Green Bay's coming. There's some good young football teams in this league. The Chargers are probably coming. The Rams, if they get a defense, they're coming. There's a lot of teams that are in the running. The Niners window, I don't believe is closed at all, but they're gonna have to have a good offseason. Give me one thing. Is there a player, either a draft pick or a free agent or anything, any player that you would, or significance or move of significance that you'd like to see them try to pursue this offseason? That would, major addition of the offseason. If you could pick one, what are you looking for?
They got to fix the offensive line. And it doesn't matter how you do it. You're most likely going to have to do it through the draft. The 49ers should, getting back to the money situation that we were talking about a while ago, should have enough money to make not a huge splash, but add a significant player somewhere. And that's obviously you got to draft. You got to figure those things out. I'm curious to see what they do here in free agency, where they add, and then that'll kind of give us an idea of what they want to do in the draft. And I haven't gotten into the draft yet. I haven't gotten into free agency yet. I was just along for the ride. But now it's time. I don't know who the names are, but I can tell you that offensive line obviously needs to be fixed. We all know that. Everybody is screaming that from the rooftops all year long. That is the number one priority. That is what has to be fixed. And as long as they can do that, they should remain contenders. It's just so hard, Larry. I saw somebody in the chat say, oh, we're just making a big deal out of nothing. They're going to be back again next year.
It's not always. It's really hard to do.
It's extremely hard to do. This team has climbed the mountain. Right. The team has climbed the mountain multiple years. You're putting extra miles on these bodies that are aging and declining. You were one of the healthiest teams in the league. That never happens for the 49ers. The NFC was about as down as it could have been. Hell, the AFC was about as down as it could have been. The league was really down this year. It was the year to get it done. And now you're going into Purdy's final year before you are probably going to have to make a decision on paying him or not. And these players are getting older. You can't guarantee health. Hell, you're already going into next season with some health concerns. Greenlaw, let's see how long he's out. Hufanga coming off of a torn ACL. So, yeah, these are all things that you have to take into consideration. Plus, the Rams in division, $40 million to spend. All their draft picks. Lions, young team, just got the experience they need. Kept Ben Johnson, $48 million to spend. But the Seattle Seahawks, who had a ton of talent, they were just coached awful. Both the offense and the defense looked like they were ran out of the 1960s. There was zero creativity. There was zero disguising anything pre to post snap. They just got basically the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan of the defensive side of the ball to come run their team. The one guy that gave Brock Purdy and this offense the most fits they had all season, he's now in Seattle with some pretty good players. And oh, by the way, Patrick Queen is a free agent. He might end up there and follow his old defensive coordinator. So there is no guarantees. A lot of these teams are getting better. The 49ers, yeah, on paper might be slightly better, but how do you climb that mountain again? I can tell you as a fan, I'm already over it. I don't care about the regular season. So how does a team that knows it's solely based on winning a Super Bowl, how do they stay focused, regain the number 1 seed? I don't know that that's a guarantee. And if they don't get the number 1 seed again at their age, they may not even make it to the Super Bowl. There's a lot of factors that go into this next year. There are no guarantees.
Yeah, I think you guys covered that perfectly.
Yeah. Jordan Matthews says, I love how Larry just skips super chats. Oh, come on. Don't be so negative. Lucian LaChance. Don't be so negative. Lucian LaChance the fourth. Sounds like he comes from money, doesn't he? Lucian LaChance the fourth. I borrowed money on Friday from my buddy Lucian LaChance the fourth. It would be such a Belichick move not to allow Tom Brady to go to the 49ers, only to sign with the 49ers himself. Yeah, seriously. Seriously.
That is.
How did he not allow Brady to go to the 49ers? What?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Brady stayed with New England. Or I guess
they drafted Gio Carmazzi over him. Gio Carmazzi's on the Brady 6.
And Tim Rattay, right?
Gio Carmazzi working on his farm. No, I think Tim Rattay was the next year.
Yeah.
No, that was the same draft. He must have been after Brady.
Was Tim Rattay also 2000?
Yeah. It was Carmazzi and Rattay.
Draft?
That's what makes me so crazy as a Niner fan. It's like, you got to be kidding me. You drafted 2 quarterbacks in the Brady draft, and this guy worked out in front of Terry Donahue, Bill Walsh, all these guys. None of you guys could picture Tom Brady being good. It's amazing.
Yeah, but
really.
Rattay had all those records. What was it, Louisiana State or something?
Louisiana Tech, yeah.
Sitao, the Italian stallion. Before
oh my God, he now he's like a shepherd or something.
They show him working on his farm or whatever in the Brady 6.
It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
I remember I saw that Hall of Fame game and Joe Montana was there, and it was Tom Brady against Gio Carmazzi, and Gio Carmazzi literally had like kind of almost like a push pass.
Yeah.
Oh, it was like so obvious that he had no career. Did he ever make it to the regular season? I don't think he did.
I don't think so.
Sitao Salisa says $4.99. Thank you, Sitao. Frank Tom Ocean. We should get DJ Reader. Great show, gentlemen. And yeah, DJ Reader would be nice in the middle. Yeah. It's hard to run on the Bengals this year in that game against Cincinnati up the middle. It was like he was just such a force. Remember what he did to Brendel in that game?
Mm-hmm.
That was not a Brendel highlight film. Ryan Crowley. There you go. Thank you.
I knew a Ryan Crowley in college. He didn't like the 49ers, though.
Everybody knows a Ryan Crowley. Here. I know. Here's one right here. Another Ryan Crowley says maybe if. Guy. Oh, do you think it's the same guy? Very similar.
It's the same Kraft Pizza.
I noticed a very similar avatar.
Different. They're different.
Are they different? Very similar.
No,
very. Is it the same guy? I'm not sure it's the same guy. Ryan Crowley. Maybe if Debo didn't have a bunch of the players partying at the strip club up until Wednesday before the game multiple times, explains his play.
Was that the case? I
don't know. I was there. I just didn't see them. You know what the strip? You know what the strip club's called in Vegas? One of them, the Library. How sweet is that?
Time there in college.
Honey, you've got a receipt in your wallet from the library. Oh yes, I was checking out books. Zaid Joanat says Pete Carroll would be perfect for our defense. It's the same scheme he runs. Yeah, but
here's what I don't get. He wanted to be a head coach, right? Like, he was pissed that he still wanted to be their head coach, and now he's going to be Shanahan's defensive coordinator.
I know. I don't know. Pete seems like the guy. I was talking to Guy Haberman about this the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, Pete seems like the last guy. Like he could almost picture Belichick doing it before Pete. We were talking about Pete, Belichick, and Saban, like these awesome defensive coaches. Which of would most likely? And I would say, there's no doubt Nick Saban's retired. No doubt.
You think Mike Shanahan will come back as the offensive coordinator too?
No, I do not believe Mike Shanahan's
Maybe
coming
get
back.
Holmgren on the quarterbacks.
Yeah. See if we can get just anybody. Get Ozzie Newsome to be the GM. All right.
He can double up with tight ends as well.
But hey, Belichick 71. I'll say this. Belichick has coached every single year in the NFL since 1975. Think about that for a second. Every year in the NFL since 75. It makes me think that he's going to coach again this year. That's all I'm saying. Ryan Crowley says Niners have a cultural problem and need massive change from key players. Trade Debo, Eric Armstead. A lot of players are losing faith. Kyle might be gone by 2025. Wow.
I think the culture is great, but I think that there's also like just tragedy of dealing with these type of losses with each other over and over again. And I don't think it would hurt to have a little bit of fresh personality, a fresh positivity. Somebody who hasn't dealt with the scars of the Tart drop pick, Jimmy G playing terrible in the 2019 Super Bowl and blowing that game with the 10-point lead. The Tart game, they had a 10-point lead in that game too. They blew that lead. Then Purdy getting hurt last year and feeling like they didn't even get their chance. Then running it back this year and coming there almost all the way healthy. I get it. Greenlaw got hurt in the Super Bowl, that you lost again. Like at some point you need a little freshness.
No question. Who do you think's got a bigger ego and couldn't deal with it if Belichick was the DC for Shanahan? Shanahan, that he would have Belichick looking over his shoulder, or Belichick that he would have, playing second fiddle to Kyle? What do you think? Whose ego would
if they win a Super
interrupt
Bowl,
this thing?
If they win a Super Bowl and Bill Belichick is here, Kyle gets like no credit. Right? I mean, that's not that he doesn't deserve it. I'm just saying that's the narrative. It's like, well, couldn't get over the hump. Brought in Bill. You won finally.
You better have a damn good offense. That's all I got to say.
I think it would be worse for Belichick. For a guy that's allegedly as OCD, as detailed, as meticulous as he is, do you think he can come in and run a defense under someone else's guidelines and rules? Like, this is probably a guy who for whatever reason, I see Bill Belichick standing in front of the pencil sharpener. You know how they always have pencils. Coach Pencil has the pencil in his ear. I feel like he's standing there and making sure that each pencil is sharpened to the same exact length and the point is tipping. The tip is pointing out, all of that. He just seems like that meticulous kind of guy. I don't know that he would necessarily work.
That sounds crazy. That doesn't sound meticulous. That sounds like the husband from Sleeping with the Enemy.
Is that too far? Does not anybody else see that guy? I don't know why I see that guy with him. Maybe it's the hoodie.
Sharpening pencils.
Maybe it's the fact that I saw Julian Edelman talking about this week on Friday, or this week on The Herd. He said that every Friday, Krug and Jesse, they used to go over the fair catch punt rule, where if you fair catch a punt, you can then kick it from that spot, the free kick. I think the Niners tried to use it once with Dave. Was it with David Akers? Jim Harbaugh tried exploiting that rule, like a 67-yard kick, something like that. He was saying that they reviewed that every single Friday in case that situation happened. Like, how detailed is that? Shanahan said that he told the coaches to tell him about the OT rules and it was good enough and we shouldn't ever question him. And here's Belichick going over the free kick rule with his players on a Friday. That's crazy, isn't that?
Well, what did you guys think of what did you guys think of Juice, who, a couple days ago was like, yeah, we didn't know. And he was on the field during the game saying, I didn't know that rule. And then talked about it afterwards, said I didn't know that rule. But then 2 days later said, oh, yeah, no, we knew the rule.
Well, I mean, Kyle changed up his story, too. It's almost as if everybody got together and was like, okay, we obviously didn't know the rule, but let's come up with the same story and tell everybody. I don't know if you guys caught this, and maybe it was coincidence, but there's something that tells me it probably wasn't. The story comes out yesterday, I think, after the Steve Wilks firing, that Tom Brady has written in his memoir that the reason he left the Patriots was because of Bill Belichick. He couldn't do it for another year. And I found that very coincidental. Like, wow, Tom Brady couldn't be trying to stop him from going to the 49ers, could he? If the 49ers are sniffing around, it's like, nah, I couldn't go there. You don't get to go there either. Nobody wants to play for this guy. That's why I left.
That's incredible. And yet that would be the kind of pivot that would be absolutely make people go, yeah, Steve Wilkes, we can live with it. Miguel Ruiz says Kyle is like Larry. They wake up every morning and look at the mirror and say, I am right. They are wrong. No, thank you. Thank you. It makes me wonder if you got a camera on me. Too Much Sauce says, I'd rather draft LaMichael James on my fantasy team than have Kyle Shanahan blow another double-digit Super Bowl lead. I think it's time to move on from Kyle. Oh, wow. LaMichael James.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that was the guy that got the ball on first and goal in the Super Bowl against the Ravens.
Yeah, he did score in the NFC Championship game, though.
He fumbled in the Super Bowl. Jordan Matthews, this is a new NFL stop using high picks on D linemen when offenses can neutralize them with a quick passing game, and the refs have shown they're not going to call holding in big games. Use those picks on the O-line. I agree. I mean, think about that, guys. The Niners have poured all their money into the defensive line, which can be neutralized by the quick game, like Mahomes did against Baltimore in the AFC Championship game. And then you mix, that in. I mean, you almost have to earn the right to rush Patrick Mahomes because they've got Pacheco in the quick game all before they ever even get to their downfield passing attack. And then, man, I mean, my God, I know it's loser talk to talk about officials, and I don't live my life like that with, the officials screwed us. I can't, though I didn't like the Baltimore Jacoby Jones double hold against Bruce Miller on that return. That was ridiculous. But basically I don't like blaming the officials. But man, that bear hug on was it the right tackle? Is it Donovan Smith or Jawan Taylor? Who was the right tackle against? Yeah, Taylor against Bosa, the bear hug, the 2-arm, I mean, I don't hug my, my favorite uncle, any better than that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It was just like, what the heck? I mean, I don't know what you guys thought of that, but I mean, that I haven't seen a bear hug non-called holding call all year. I mean, that's the obvious call, right? If you go both, usually you're hooking a guy with one arm, but if you bear hug a guy, I mean, isn't that a hold like almost every Sunday? And to just not call that in the Super Bowl seems really like, guys, what are we doing? I don't know. Seemed egregious to me.
That happened multiple times. The deep pass on Mahomes, the one that he completed, I tweeted out, are we just not gonna notice the bear hug at the top of the screen right there? Like, what's going on? Just gonna bypass that one?
Yeah. I mean, it's just so damn frustrating. Jin Rail says, I think we have to trade Debo. What do you think? Yeah, who's trading for him?
Yeah, I don't.
Vish already brought this up. Yeah. Nobody's going, wait a second. Do you have a guy who looks like he plays 3/4 speed and drops balls in key moments and comes up small in the playoffs and is making like, I don't know, $28 million?
And he's hurt a lot.
He's hurt a lot and he runs through people. So he's probably going to be hurt a ton. Yes. Let's give them a 2. Let's give them a 1, 2 2s, and a 3. No. What would you take for Debo right now?
I don't know.
Realistically, to unload the contract, it's a weird situation because I don't know.
A 2, maybe? Maybe a 2?
Yeah, but I don't think you get a 2 to Debo to unload the contract. If you're trading Debo, you're basically trading him to unload the contract, which means that I think you're better off getting more from Debo on your team than what you're going to get in return for him at this point.
You're waiting until after June 1st, otherwise it's not a savings. And at that point, draft picks for what, the following year? I don't know.
Jordan Matthews, not changing the culture without changing Kyle. Kyle just got a new extension. And there were people that were like, hey, you know what? Jed should have waited. Jed should have made them win the Super Bowl before they got the extension. Do you agree with that?
Wait, this is the one he got at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, they just got extensions.
Yeah. Oh, they got another one?
No.
Like week 3. This year.
Yeah, okay.
Or was
Yeah,
it
yeah.
before? Was it? I don't remember.
It was
It was
before the
early.
year, but remember they didn't announce it until week 3 because
Yeah.
before the year they just straight
Oh,
had
that's
traded.
right. They
Yeah.
announced it then, and it was okay. Yeah.
Jesse
I mean, I'm
Wade
not
says
shocked by that.
trade Debo in a third for a second. They pay remaining cap.
I mean, that's a deal that you could maybe do, but you're gonna have to include something to get a second for Debo, I think, to move the contract.
Review Scientology USA says draft Ben Sinnott out of K-State. He'll be a great replacement for Kittle. I've seen him. I don't know about that. I don't know. To me, he looks nice, but he doesn't look like Kittle. Frank, though, I'm not adverse to moving Kittle if you have to. He's the guy that I think teams would overpay for. Frank Tom Ocean says if they re-sign Brandon Ayuk, it would lower his cap hit for a couple of years, enough time to let Debo's contract expire. We need to keep Brandon Ayuk. He's a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. I agree, but you're also going to you're paying Debo 28, so you're going to pay 2 wide receivers over $50 million on a team that's 32nd in the NFL in pass attempts. I mean, just think about that for a second. That's a lot of money. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Jordan Matthews says you can't have $45 million tied up in 2 wide receivers with this scheme, and you're 32nd in pass attempts. What the hell? Jordan, are you stealing from me now? Trade Debo or Brandon Ayuk for the pick and use it on the O-line. I mean, J.C. Latham looks like he could be a plug-and-play tackle, the Alabama kid, wears 65. He's like 335 and just ridiculous. He seems like he could be almost a plug-and-play guy at right tackle for the next decade. I don't know. There's a lot of receivers in this draft. I personally like Jerry Rice's kid, and I think McCaffrey's younger brother is not bad on day 3 either, but I really like Jerry's kid. And, you're talking about 6'4", 210, good route runner, very, very, very good football player. He's not as dynamic as Ayuk, but he's bigger, and he's got great ball skills. The game's really important to him. So I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. It's tough because there's so many hit and miss. The Niners have missed with so many wide receivers. Would hate to get rid of a guy who's such a burgeoning star player. Blood Moon says Eric Bieniemy as OC. That would be interesting for Kyle to get insight on Andy's mind and what Eric has learned. Also, Kittle ain't going no fucking where.
I don't think he is either. I also don't think that you read the last super chat because it had the most wild.
I missed it.
Autocorrect of all time. I don't know how that's your autocorrect. I've got questions.
Oh, I just realized that. Holy cow!
I can't picture. I can't picture the Niners. See how when you're really a smooth reader. Like if I were a president and this was my teleprompter, I can't pick urethra.
Go Ron Burgundy. Go Ron Burgundy on it.
I can't pick urethra, Niners. Excuse me? I can't picture the Niners without Brandon Ayuk. He's the one guy who's consistently healthy and doing everything right. We're going back if we trade Brandon Ayuk for rookies. I hear you. Khaled Rice, they showed the blitz, the play before the 2-minute warning. If you watch the replay, when he put Jennings in motion, the blitz switched to the opposite side, and the free safety almost went off sides. Duffy was cheating in. I thought Duffy was fantastic in the Super Bowl. And if there was one complaint I would have for the Niners as far as where they attacked, why did they attack that guy so much? That guy is super special. I mean, that's the last guy. That's the guy not to attack. Didn't it seem like they went at him at a disproportionate number of times?
Yeah, they didn't really go at Snead, which was good. But yeah, that's what didn't make sense to me because I'll give you the contrast to it. How many times in the game did the Chiefs take a chance? Now, they definitely don't trust their guys on the outside the way the 49ers like Debo and Ayuk versus matchups. But what chances did they take against Mooney Ward? They took their chances trying to throw at Oren Burks and trying to throw at, the other guys on this secondary. It wasn't like they took their chances trying to throw one-on-one at Ward. The Niners, for whatever reason, kept trying McDuffie, and he owned Debo. You're right.
I'll tell you the part that's going to be so hard to get beyond. We've all seen the live mic of the Super Bowl where the Chiefs special teams coach is like, "Hey guys, in overtime, we got what we want here." You know what I mean? That's going to be hard to. That's bad footage. That's bad footage. Abu Marco 23. One thing that jumps out was how bad Bosa crashed down on the run fake during all the Mahomes runs. They brilliantly used his aggression against him. That's what happens. You're trying to get home, man. You're trying to get home. But yeah, Mahomes and to me, Mahomes' running was the wild card factor in this game. And when you look at that final box score and you're like, he ran 9 times for 66 yards, including a 22-yarder. Those are backbreakers, man.
Yeah.
Those are backbreakers.
But with this one, I'm not sure because I haven't gone back and watched those Mahomes runs in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I haven't watched a lot of the defense. But Bosa crashing down is typically how they play it. In the past, the Niners have always been a scrape exchange team versus the read option. And a scrape exchange team means that you scrape, which means the defensive end is going to crash down and he gets exchanged and he gets replaced by the middle linebacker who comes over and becomes the new C-gap player. So that's what usually happens. So I don't know what happened in the Super Bowl, but Bosa crashing down, that's how the Niners have played defense like since they started stopping the read option with Robert Saleh in 2020. Or in 2019, they've always been end crash down, linebacker replaces in the C gap. So just saying.
They also hadn't run that read option play in about 2 seasons. So they really kind of pulled out all the stops on the 49ers.
Niners clearly weren't ready to defend that read option. David Sante says, face it, they weren't prepared. RG says Reed was 61 when he won his first Super Bowl. He used to be the can't win the big one guy. Kyle is 44. How long will it take?
But he needed to get it's also
hopefully not till he's 61.
Yeah, I can't. I can't hang with it till 61.
He's the can't win the big guy, but also to win the big one, he got a quarterback that through 6 seasons, you take Mahomes' 6th year and you compare it with any 6-year stretch in any other quarterback's career, any 6 years in Brady's career, and it's his first 6 years, Mahomes' 6 years are better than anybody in NFL history. So he needed to get that to ultimately get over the top. I don't know if it's really a realistic outlook to look at him as good as he was before he got Mahomes. Because Mahomes is just that guy. Like, that's just not realistic to find somebody like that again.
If you're Jed, how many years you give Kyle before you're like, hey, bro, come on, man?
I mean, he's not going to be.
Seasons.
Yeah, I was going to say, you put him on a hot seat after not making the playoffs. Maybe in a year you're expected to make the playoffs, and then if he doesn't make it again, you consider firing him. But he's got.
What would you say right now in Jed's mind?
Jed
he's probably got at least 5 more years, huh?
Yeah, Jed came out and said if they lost as favorites in the NFC Championship
to
game
Detroit
at home to Detroit, it was a successful season.
Right. He's got low standards.
He's got lower standards for this team than we do as fans.
He does. I would say Jed's going to give Shanahan at least 5 more years.
I think Jed has no credibility without Shanahan, so I think he's kind of stuck with him.
He's afraid. He's afraid to go without Shanahan. What it could entail.
I'm not saying they shouldn't fire him now by any means,
right?
but
nobody's. I haven't heard anybody say fire him. They just went to the Super Bowl, but I'm just saying they haven't gotten it done. They're clear. They're the 40 freaking Niners. Their clear goal is to win the Super Bowl. How long does he get without winning the Super Bowl before Jed's like, "Hey, bro, what's up? You gonna deliver one?" And, when does the heat get on Kyle? I would say he's got at least 5 more years.
Do you think Jed ever puts it on him? I feel like Kyle kind of saved Jed. The organization, he was 3 coaches fired in 3 years. Nobody, it was a mess. They had the 31st ranked defense, 32nd ranked defense, 31st ranked offense. One of the worst run defenses we've ever seen. Now look at them. They're back.
That's over a decade though.
But that's what I'm saying. Shanahan saved him. Jed didn't know what he was doing, and now the 49ers are back to being as credible as they've ever been.
Yeah, and they're worth Shanahan. A lot.
Yeah. And look at it, contrast it to his uncle, right? Because everybody likes grandstanding with his uncle. His uncle drove the greatest coach we've ever seen so nuts, even when he was winning Super Bowls, that he got out of football. He couldn't deal with the pressure and all of that. Do you think Jed's doing that to Kyle? Jed's doing America's Game stories the week before the Super Bowl about how him and Kyle were talking about this and talking about that. This is a very different situation. I think Kyle is as good as it gets. I don't necessarily blame Jed because Kyle is just that good is a very, very good coach. But I also think that keeps Kyle from reaching his true potential because I don't know that he feels the urgency because I don't think Jed really makes him feel the urgency.
We got this one from Monty. He says Andy Reid has Nagy, McVay as LaFleur, both great offensive minds with a ring. Kyle needs to put the pride away and get an OC. What do you guys think? Is it just too much? These jobs get bigger and bigger and bigger as the seasons go on. You know, nobody can be the GM and the head coach. He's kind of everything. He's kind of like the last line of defense for the defense. He's involved in the decision making on personnel. He's wearing a lot of hats. He's the OC. He's the head coach. What do you think? Does Shanahan
I agree.
Does he need an OC?
He won't. He won't. But I'm not saying he shouldn't or he can't call plays. But I mean, like I said, he wears too many hats, and that's where the mistakes made. It was way, way, way before we got to the Super Bowl. So I think the more people.
Oh, sorry.
I was just saying the way. I mean, the more people that he can have under him that he trusts to help him out, the better.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just going to ask, when did Mike LaFleur win a Super Bowl?
I don't know, but somebody said in the chat, and it definitely does say it, that Brandon Staley's the defensive coordinator on Wikipedia for the 49ers.
Oh, what? Actually?
I mean, it's already happened?
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, he's currently the defensive coordinator. Now, I mean, obviously people hack it all the time.
Who did that? Please tell me that was a hack on Wikipedia.
Yeah, I'm hoping so.
Because sometimes Wikipedia nails it too. You know that? I'm looking him up right now as we speak.
Is Wikipedia ahead of us?
No, they're not. It doesn't say. Oh, it does say that. San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator,
right at
2024 template present. Whoever edited it didn't do a good job editing it.
Yeah, they did the template part. Yeah.
What do you guys think if that's indeed the case? I mean, this guy gave up 60 some odd points to the Raiders earlier this year. Clearly, his defense quit on him. The one thing you don't got to worry about as the DC is he won't be going for it on fourth down. And that seems like one of his biggest problems. He got it done with the Rams in 2020. What do you think? If he's the guy, how do you feel?
Awful head coach, but I don't know. 1 year of defensive coordinator doesn't excite me. I mean, that's probably like the least exciting of all the names that we've discussed tonight.
I was about to go straight there. It's not what he was as a head coach. It's not that he wasn't smart the 1 year he was the defensive coordinator. It's that I want a guy with experience. Part of what makes Spags so good for the Chiefs is in the middle of these playoff games, that guy he's been there. He's battle tested. He's had to deal with stopping Brady and stopping Manning and stopping these great quarterbacks, stopping Favre. So he's had to go through it. He knows how to deal with it. Staley was a defensive coordinator for 1 year, running a scheme, the Fangio scheme with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey on a very, very talented defense with a good offense. Like it's not the same thing as calling plays. I would prefer somebody with experience, somebody who's veteran, somebody who's been there having to coach and call the great games against the great coaches many different times before. I think that would be more helpful for them.
I have an idea. Since we have a head coach that we've already said isn't the most buttoned up when it comes to situational football, why not hire a defensive coordinator that's also not buttoned up in situational football? That should do him very well.
These guys will get along perfect. Staley is known for using multiple alignments aimed at getting the most out of players. He got the flexibility to use the Seattle cover 3 if that's what Shanahan wants, if that's what fits the personnel, or Shanahan could trust Staley to teach the players a different look, different fronts, different approaches dictated by the opponent.
Front though, like just personnel wise, let's talk about it, right? Like Eric Armstead was a 2-gap nightmare his rookie year. Does anybody not remember that? They tried this with him as a 5 technique his rookie year. It didn't work. It was not what he was suited for. Javon Hargrave, okay, he's suited to do that. They've got one guy there. Nick Bosa standing up, like, yeah, he can do that, but you're taking away from what makes Nick Bosa if you're starting to do stuff like that. So, like, I guess so now Sebastian Joseph Day becomes a guy that possibly comes back because he's real pally with Brandon Staley and knows the scheme. I just don't know that one makes sense. And I don't personally, I don't know about you guys. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I don't love the opinion. I don't love this idea of trying to teach another DC the scheme on the fly and integrating him. I think it led to a little bit of a bumpy road with Wilks, and maybe they'll get along better with Staley, but come on.
To me, I'd rather go Belichick or Vrabel if I could do it, if it was just a matter of cutting the check. Shanahan's never lost to Staley. The 49ers won all 3 of the games where Staley was the defensive coordinator or head coach where they squared off against each other. They squared off twice in 2020 when Staley ran the Rams defense. And they had 1 game against each other during Staley's time with the Chargers. So, I don't know. Staley doesn't to me, he doesn't have a commanding presence in front of the room. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but to me, it seems like you had DeMeco Ryans, Robert Saleh, and Steve Wilks, and now you're going to go to this guy. I think that, not that this guy's defense isn't strong or his credentials aren't strong, but as far as just a commanding presence as a speaker, it's just not. I don't see it. Not that he can't do it, but I'm just saying.
You got a guy with commanding presence. You're usually good at reading body language on something like this.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't paid attention enough to some of these other guys. I just think it sucks that, the 49ers obviously going to the Super Bowl is a great thing, but you're so late into this process now. Everybody's already hired all their people, and you're the last one with an opening because you went to the Super Bowl. It's just not ideal. This is not the ideal time. So obviously those big names would be great. We know Vrabel. I mean, talk about commanding presence. Vrabel definitely does, but I don't know. I agree with Staley, though. He doesn't. And it is always a little bit worrisome whenever you're a head coach and your team doesn't do well in the thing that you were brought in to do, especially when it had talent like the Chargers. They were awful defensively, couldn't stop anything. And that's what he was a defensive guy. And they had talent over there.
To be fair, a lot of it got hurt, to be fair to him. But you're right. And he's less experienced. The name that I kind of was thinking, like, if everybody's just so obsessed with this scheme-changing route, and this is where Jesse's point about them having to wait because of the Super Bowl and all of that is so right on, is like, okay, if you're going to go in full-on changing the scheme out, of love for them to hire Wink Martindale then. Like, that's something that's like, okay, you're talking about an experienced defensive coordinator that's coached in those big games, he's creative, he's outside of the box. He's the kind of guy that can stand up to a Spags or something like that. If you're going to commit yourself to making wholesale changes, why not get a guy who's going to be your long-standing defensive coordinator? He's a very good, respected defensive coordinator, and he's never going to be hired. Well, He took the Michigan job, so who knows what goes on there. Maybe he pulls a Bill O'Brien, but I don't know if he would do that for the 49ers. And so I think that Jesse's absolutely right about them being in a tough spot. Do you guys know any other former head coaches? I see someone threw Rex Ryan in the chat. Is he still in doing it?
He said he wanted to be Dallas's defensive coordinator.
But wasn't his thing in Buffalo that he was done? Their staff, they partied and they were just not caring?
That's the thing. I mean, they've really had some really good, hardworking, smart young guys. Shanahan's had it. I mean, look where the Niner defensive coordinators have graduated to. I mean, I think DeMeco obviously is one of the best young head coaches in the game. I think Saleh's a really good head coach too. To be honest, it just hasn't happened. And with the Jets, it's a difficult place to turn things around. But I like what those guys have done. And Wilks will probably get a good job somewhere, but they to me, they need somebody of significance. Vrabel makes a lot of sense too. I mean, I think Vrabel's interesting. He was a smart, heady player. He was a two-way player, if you remember. I mean, he seems like he could be a guy. He seemed like I'm a little surprised that it ended as quickly as it did for him in Tennessee. I don't know how you guys felt about that, but maybe there was a dispute between Rand Carthon and him. But
You know what Vrabel would be truly exceptional at? Because you're right, there might have been a dispute, and it seemed like there was a dispute with Vrabel and John Robinson as well. So perhaps he would be a tough guy to get along with. But Jesse just brought up the point about game management in relation to Staley. The one thing Vrabel has just been out of this world at his time in Tennessee is he's been the game management like master, right? He was the guy who did the punt trick on Belichick where they take the false start, or they take the was it they take the false start to save more time, or the delay a game
Yeah,
to save more time. He's the one who pulled that game management trick. Maybe like if I'm going along Jesse's like big brain idea of grand scheme thinking with the defensive coordinator, like Vrabel would help the Niners game management, but it's hard for me to think that anybody even talks to Shanahan in those moments because he goes off of his feel. He takes in all the information and he just is able to close his eyes and pick out exactly what the correct thing is to do every time. And he's always correct. He never regrets it. And he would never change anything.
Exactly. Black Caesar says, I just wanted to thank you. I was being an unreasonable fan that has been too devastated to think about anything football. Thanks for helping me cope. Quest for 6 is still on. LOL. It's been a rough week for a lot of people. Holland Tracy says, I know it's difficult to repeat, Jesse, but we've been doing it for half a decade now. Next year will be our year. Watch. Buy your New Orleans arrangements now. Is that where it is? New Orleans next year?
Is it
Super Bowl?
next year?
Hopefully
I think
they
that's
got a generator this time.
I wouldn't mind going back to New Orleans. New Orleans is, come on.
Maybe you can catch Shanahan in a dark room by himself after the game, like you did with Harbaugh.
Yeah,
that's right.
You can kick open the doors of the hallways and ask him about where the media room is.
I'll tell you, being in that Superdome, the press box is, man, it is claustrophobic in there, man. It's like, the walls, like it's the side of the wall, that's like everything's kind of at an angle. Claustrophobic. Blood Moon says Eric Bieniemy not it, or is he? He's not it. They're not going to go with Eric Bieniemy. But it is amazing that Eric Bieniemy hasn't gotten a gig, considering how much he's been out front with Kansas City through the years. Jordan Matthews.
But then they also told him that they would give Matt Nagy the job that he was coveting.
Yeah, and Andy always called the plays. Right. So, if Andy's calling the plays, that's a big part of why Bieniemy was not getting gigs. Jordan Matthews says, you're stealing from me, Larry. My comment was 30 minutes ago. Love the work, fellas. This helps all of us cope. Just don't see this team recovering. I did not. You think I look ahead on the chat? I'd rather look at Vish's paper during a spelling test than look ahead on the chat. I would never do that.
It took you 15 minutes to find the QB school.
Seriously, seriously, I'm struggling here. Do not make me the guy who's doing nefarious things that take talent. I do not have that talent to do those.
We have a private chat, Jordan. He 100% stole your take. Don't let him fool you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And by the way,
I'm not a take stealer.
My processing speed might be a little bit slow. I'm one of these slower processing quarterbacks. But I finally understood, what are you talking about? You would rather look at my paper on a spelling test. You would be honored to look at my paper. I was constantly the recipient of the alternate spelling list.
Can I tell you there were a moment in 5th grade when I noticed a kid in my class had the book in his lap and was looking down during the spelling test. And I'm like, hey, what the heck? What's going on over here? Look at this guy. And the teacher's like, Bernard, you can't look at. He goes, I was just trying to look at what the next word was. It's a good answer.
Nice.
It's a good answer.
That's a good answer.
It's a real good answer. But then I'm like, called BS on that right away. I'm like, come on.
Bernard might be watching you today, and he's like, oh, crew caught me in that moment.
Seriously, 5th grade. I'm a great speller. I just look ahead because I like to see what the next word is. Batman 29. We are the San Francisco second placers with Kyle. Oh, man. Jeff says, Larry, thoughts on Graham Barton from Duke, right tackle, right guard, has played center before to All-American and have heard nothing but good things about him off the field. Yeah, he can play a bunch of different positions. There's no question about that. But a lot of people think that he's not quite good enough to play tackle, that he might be more of a guard/center, which makes his value not as good. To me, he seems like a try-hard guy. I have seen him. He's pretty thick guy. He's pretty smart. Went to Duke. But to me, he looks like a guard. And I don't know that I would take a guard in the first round. But I would say probably mid-second round. That would be my guess. Graham Barton. It's a good tackle draft, by the way. Really good tackle draft. All right, guys. Is there a topic that I have not covered that you guys would like to hit before we jet for the door? We're 2 hours and 4 minutes into our live stream, but we have gone 3 hours before. But it is midnight in the East, and I've got to respect that for Jesse. It's only 9 o'clock here. I mean, I still, the night is young for me out here. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do. I might have some friends over. We might, listen to some music and just hang out. I mean, it's an early night. I may go on a drinking binge. I may review the Super Bowl again just for the hell of it, just because I can, just because it's 9 p.m. on the West Coast. So, is there a topic that we have not covered that you or Jesse would like to cover that would make tonight's Krug Show, Vish Kumaran, Last Second Sports extravaganza complete in your guys' minds?
I'm good. What about you, Jesse?
You're good? That's it? You're good?
I'm good. Jesse, Krug, we got to keep the people wanting. We're going to be getting into draft stuff. You're already spouting out a bunch of names that I haven't really familiarized
I'm flexing.
myself with. So I'm getting ready. I'll be doing my prep. I'll be getting on draft. I had to take a couple days break. This game really made me cope. I'm not gonna lie. Like I was really sad that the Niners lost. I couldn't see football media for a little bit. Now I'm getting back into it. I'm making my recovery.
So what you're trying to say is you haven't quite gotten to the Graham Barton highlights yet.
I didn't even know Graham Barton was a player in this draft until now. But I'll be
There
ready.
you go.
Don't worry. Give me some time.
All right. He wears 62 for Duke.
That's good to know.
Just when you flip on that film, 62 for Duke, Graham Barton. You remember who else went to Duke, who the Niners had on the offensive line?
Laken Tomlinson.
Laken freaking Tomlinson.
I remember when he came out of Duke, in fact.
Yeah.
2017, I think.
That was a nice little pickup, by the way. Jesse, is there a topic that we didn't cover that you think it's important that we cover?
I don't think so. I mean, if there's something to cover, I'll stay up, but I feel like we kind of hit it all. I mean, I might be mistaken. Chat, you let me know if is there something we didn't discuss that you want to discuss. It is midnight, but I'm a man of the people. What do you want to see discuss?
JTO? Yeah, JTO maybe has a comment.
Ever since I've had to go to work on Fridays, I've not been a man of the people in these settings.
FEMA Camp says, why is Vish on bobblehead setting? He's rocking me to sleep.
That would be 3 espresso shots today, FEMA Camp etiquette for dummies. I had a lot of work.
Look at that. 187 says, Larry Dog. Anytime you get the DAWG with lots of G's, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, 187 has been
Knicks.
hanging with us since the end of last year. I mean, this time last year, he was just in here telling us about how Purdy was going to be okay. We don't need to worry about his elbow. We're crazy for talking about it. I remember him from then.
JD Modest says Krug is a total influencer. Incredible. And then this one from Niner Empire. He says Larry might drop his first mock draft. The night is still young. I could go 7-round mock draft on your ass.
You better pick the Duke guard.
What's that?
You better pick the Duke guard.
Hey, you know what? You know what was really cool from the Super Bowl, by the way? We do a call-in show, and I don't know. You guys do call-in shows, right? I know, Jesse. I know you used to, but then you didn't. But you've gotten back to doing
one
them.
last night. Yeah, I just did one last night.
So there's something about the call-in show. Chris Hansen says Krug's got them edibles. Come on. Are you kidding me? I was coaching Little League a couple hours ago, and I don't have any edibles on me. No. But I'm working material over here. What was I saying? Wait a second. Look at this one. Josh.
I knew
Krug,
that
I
one
want to
wasn't
sponsor
slipping past you.
Josh Achapinti.
If
I want
only
to
you call
sponsor
him
this
Josh.
show. John.
He wants to sponsor. He wants you to sponsor him, even though the fact that you called him Josh 2 times. Poor
John Achapinti. When I need a good lawyer, I go to John Achapinti. Why? Because he's reliable. He's trustworthy. And he's here for you. Not just me. He's here for Jesse. He's here for Vish. He's here for me. He's here for you. It's John Achapinti. And he's been in business for years, and nobody's better. I'm not 100% sure what he does, but he does it well. He does it well. And he does it at a fair price, and you leave happy. Why? Because he's John Achapinti. How is it, John? What do you think?
Victor says Larry's a beast. He's not even tired. He's 3 hours behind me. What do you?
Right.
And he's 2 hours
Right.
behind Vish. Like, what
Right.
do you
The
expect?
night's young. I could go pick up John Achapinti. We could cruise for girls. Seriously. That's John Achapinti,
What about
ladies and
Josh?
gentlemen. Josh's cousin might be joining us later on. You don't want to get John and Josh Achapinti. When the Achapinti brothers get together, it's, you know what I'm saying.
No, I
right.
don't. What was that?
There's a lot there.
I think it might
These
be time
guys
to go
are
on
at
back.
each other's throats. But I've always
Don't
said,
you elaborate?
of all the Achapintis, John is the one that I believe in most. And that's why you ought to take your business to whatever John Achapinti does. And you
5
take it from me,
This is why
Larry Kruger from The Krug Show. When I go Achapinti, I go John Achapinti.
I don't always Achapinti, but when I do, it's John Achapinti.
I don't always Achapinti, but when I do, I go with John Achapinti. And you should too. I'm not sure what it is.
And he was better than Pig in the Pickle, Krug.
I'm not
This
sure
is
what
crazy.
John does, but John is, damn, he's good at it. He is good at it.
The Achapinti Krug show. I could see.
Has
it
a
in your
nice little ring. John, what do you think?
What about Pig in the Pickle? He says he's better than them.
You're
We got
what?
beat.
He said he's
Yeah.
better than Pig in a Pickle?
He did.
Wait a second. Achapinti needs some Pasquale's New York style Italian sausage. Now, is that what he needs?
We grew up with a Sunday dinner.
It's John Achapinti, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. I've had enough fun here. I can do no more good. Wait a second. We do have a couple supers that have crawled in. Blood Moon says, did Bernard pummel yo ass for ratting on him? LOL.
He's talking about Bernard from the spelling test.
No, I know. No. Come on. Seriously.
Krug was
I
the big
could have
guy in
taken-
fifth grade.
I could have taken Bernard down with one arm. I mean, Bernard was not in my league back then. Even now he could be, but back then, no.
Krug, you were a big fifth grader.
I was an intimidating fifth grader.
You got two. You got two.
Krug
You got
was
two
held
I was-
chocolate
years.
milk cartons.
I was
You got
6'1" in the fifth grade. All right, and so I'm 6'1" now, but I was 6'1" then. All right, so yes, Bernard wanted no part of this. All right, Dan Serrano says, "Show your appreciation for the channel. Hit that thumbs up." That's right. Everybody hit like and subscribe, and do the channel solid. All right, that's going to do it for us. I'm hoping, guys. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but we're rolling, right? We're rolling right through the off season. We got draft, we got combine, we got mini camp. We're going Thursday nights, right? I mean, we're big showing it. We're not taking the off season off. There's no we're going to keep rolling.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be no Cabo trip between us.
There'll be no Cabo, no.
Unless you guys decided to not give me the invite and the two of you are going.
You're not going to go visit relatives for 19 years, no.
Only 1 month. That's possible.
You were gone a long time.
I was.
You were gone a long time. We brought in the coach. We called him Vish. Nobody went for it.
We share a couple of similarities. Like
That's right.
he might be John to my Josh Oshapenti.
There you go. Asha Penty. Hey, Asha Penty, if you need to get a hold of me, just DM me on Twitter and we'll work something out. We'll see. We'll see if you can work something out. I don't know. Things we may be two ships that
talk to your people.
My people will talk to your people. If we find that we're mutually beneficial for one another, we'll go forward. Asha Penty Krug Show. I can make no promises. All right, guys, good stuff. I'm entertaining just myself at this point, and it's midnight. Jesse's like, it's fucking midnight, and this guy's doing West Coast hijinks and throwing his early to bed time in my face, and it's midnight, and my kids are going to get me out of the rack. All right, guys. Hey, have a great night, everybody. Go Niners. I'd love to sit here and say, hey, guess what? They were wrong. The Niners actually did win the Super Bowl, but they still lost. But we'll be back next week, and we'll talk more about it on The Krug Show.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful.